Degenation fam, what is up? What's happening? Ignore the little technical difficulties there. When you got 5 people on the pod, it's bound to happen. It's the NFL DFS Thanksgiving breakdown for the Degenation. Ryan Williams here coming at you. Ryan Alexander _W is where you can find me on Twitter, joined by the usual suspects. Mr. Kevin Steele himself, the Godfather at Fantasy Raf 13 is where you can find him on Twitter. The boy, Matty D, Matty Buckets, Matty DFS on Twitter. And we got our guest tonight. Oh, man. They don't really need an introduction, but I'm going to do an introduction anyway. Derek Brown at Dbro FFB, excuse me. Man, I'm too excited. And we got the boy, Ben Cummins at Ben Cummins FF. Fellas, it's like a family reunion right now. We got the tradition going live with the DFS breakdown. I don't know if we're going to go for the full 90, the 2 hours that we usually do when we get together. But, man, it's going to be fun. It's going to be lit. We got 3 games. Talk to me, boys. How you guys doing? Derek?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. I knew this was going to be a sit down for a while, so I just brought the bottle in here with me, and that way I can just keep pouring, man. We're ready to go. It's lit. It's holiday season time, man. This feels like when you find that really comfy sweater in the back of the closet and it's getting cold outside, you put that thing on. This is exactly what this feels like, man. I love doing this podcast with y'all every damn year, man.
Man, I love it. I love it. And Ben, how you doing, man? This is your first one with us this year, right?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. I love this Thanksgiving slate, and I can't wait to break it down with this crew. Let's get it.
I love it. I love it. Short and sweet as they all do. You guys can find Derek's work, FTN. He's holding it down one half of the Chalk Fade podcast. And Ben Cummins, you guys know him. He's doing stuff with the fantasy footballers, talking DFS all year, getting at it. He's going to be our FanDuel expert, our concierge for FanDuel. As we usually talk Draftkings on here, but Ben, the people want to talk about FanDuel too. So happy you're here with us.
Got to diversify, man.
I love it. Diversify the profile and portfolio, excuse me. But before we get into it, guys, episode 90, you know what it is. The TFA, powered by the TFA. You guys can find us on Twitter at FF_authority. Make sure you're rocking with the content on YouTube. If you guys are watching us there, we appreciate you. Subscribe to the channel, like the channel, comment on the channel. Tell us what we're doing good, what we can improve on. If you tell us what we can improve on, I'm just going to toss it to Kev and have him figure it out. That's what I usually do. But subscribe to the podcast as well, the podcast software. We're having a good time rocking with you guys. It's week 12, and we're kicking it off with the Draftkings Thanksgiving slate. Now, before we get into that, fellas, it's Thanksgiving, and I can't save this to the end. I usually do that year after year. I want to get it out the way. It's Kev's tradition. He usually talks about this around Christmas time, but with Thanksgiving, we got to talk about what we're doing Thanksgiving this year. I mean, it's a different time, but what are we excited about, boys? What we thankful for, what we excited about? Let's start off on a good note. Kevin, I'm going to start with you, man. Talk to the people. Get in there.
I'm just looking forward to put all you motherfuckers in a body bag tonight.
Oh, that's what you're thankful for, huh?
Bring it at him, Gates.
Let's go. He didn't even stick around to hear what the hell he had to say. What's he going to get?
He's going to come in. He's looking at the YouTube channel.
He's scheming.
He's looking at the
I don't
YouTube.
like it.
He's going to get props, man. I bet he's got props. Like, he done thought this out.
But only Kev, what are you thankful for? First, 3 words out of his mouth. You motherfuckers. I love it. I love it. Let's go.
Ben, take it over for him, man. What you doing this Thanksgiving and how you feeling about it? NFL or otherwise?
I'm just gonna stay safe. Just have it with my wife, and just thankful for football, thankful for DFS, thankful for you motherfuckers, and just thankful for my health and my job, and hopefully we'll be thankful for some money on Thursday night.
Hey, there we go. Matty Buckets, talk to him, baby. What are we doing? You traveling, right?
Yeah, so my mom's birthday is on Christmas Day, and since I'm obligated to spend that with her, the deal with the wife is I do Thanksgiving Day with her family. So usually we try to go down and see my family a day or two before. So we're going to head down there tomorrow to the Virginia Beach area,
Okay.
see my family for a day or two, and then come back up and spend Thanksgiving here. So nothing too crazy, about an hour and a half drive for us. So laying low, taking it easy, seeing some family. Thankfully, everybody in the family has been healthy through all this. So It's definitely something to be thankful for.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. And Derek, You got the kiddos over there, man. You got the squad, the D-Bro squad. How's everything going over there with you? What you doing?
Man, we got enough to almost feel like an offensive line over here. Well, we probably be the same thing as like the Jets offensive line. Don't block, got like 3 dudes healthy. It's all good. Man, like it's good. I can't complain, man. It's been a good year. I'm super thankful, man. Everybody in the family's happy, healthy. It's all been great, man. The fam's doing good. I'm excited, man, because I get to sit here and break open a few cold ones. I'm going to turn on the greaseless fryer, throw the turkey in there and the smoker, and just chill, bro. Like Thanksgiving is going to be nothing but chill and watch some football.
I love it. And this is the perfect year for it, man. I'm thankful for football, man. I'm thankful for the season that we've had. I mean, with everything going on, it's been such a great way to just take the edge off after the week. I mean, go through the week. Escape. Thank you, Matt. You took the words out of my mouth. The escape. You just go through the week, get that Sunday slate going. It's just been fun, man. It's been fun energy on the Twitter sphere. It's been fun energy with the friends. Ben, we've had some conversations about DFS. It's been a struggle. Definitely, it's a struggle all year, but that's why they give us 17 weeks in the regular season to play. We got showdowns. We got Thanksgiving slate. We got just a ton to get into. So I'm just loving it, but happy to be able to, have the family all healthy as well too here, and planning a wedding during this time as well too. So just thankful that, me and the lady are in good graces and can get to that. But want to get that out the way, start off on a high note here as we get into the Thanksgiving slate and what could just be changing it on its head, as the Thanksgiving slate already has started off with some news. We got COVID. We got COVID taking over the slate, with it taking over the running backs on this slate. Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins, who just broke out last week in week 11. I shouldn't say broke out, but had another stellar game there when he's seeing the majority of the snaps in the backfield. And so we already got that. We got the injuries with, the Lions with Deandre Swift still being, in that concussion protocol. We don't know what's going on with him. Kenny Galladay's been limited. Juju Smith-Schuster steps on a penalty flag, and now he's on the injury report. Just crazy things to kind of unpack.
I saw that.
Is that not wild?
Oh, that was crazy, man. It looked like almost like he was faking that. That was nuts.
On his birthday, exactly, Ben.
When I saw it, I said, there's no way he got injured by stepping on the flag. There's no way. And then sure enough, he got injured by stepping on the flag.
On the wrong part. Just ridiculous, man. But it's the NFL, what we're dealing with this year. It's crazy, right? We got, McLaurin and Gibson, they're being held out of virtual practice and, showing up questionable on the injury report after missing virtual practice. I don't know how that happens, or virtual walkthrough, but they should be all right, but something to monitor. So of course we're doing this on a Monday here, very early. We do things early here at the Degeneration Nation, just to kind of give an overview of the slate. And that's where we get into it. We start off with 3 games. We got Houston, Detroit, Washington, Dallas, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. And we got to start off at the quarterback position, and let's just talk about it, boys, and break it down, because, we got guys like Desean Watson, Lamar Jackson on this slate. We also got, Ben Roethlisberger, who's been cooking with the receivers that he has as of late, putting up numbers. And then we got guys like Stafford, Dalton, and Alex Smith to round it out. So it's going to be interesting to see where we get to builds, as this was kind of shaping up the past couple of weeks. I think people were kind of a little bit down about it once, Alex Smith was named the starter. It didn't look like there would be much there with that Dallas game with Andy Dalton not being back. I think people were kind of low on that, but he just looked decently in the Vikings game. So that game's looking all right. Watson's been crazy, and Stafford, if he gets his weapons back, that should be an explosive game there to top it off. And then Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh's undefeated right now, so Baltimore could be looking to take them down for their first loss of the season. So we got a lot to like in this slate. Let's unpack it here. Maddie, I'm going to start it off with you, man, because, we want to get into it right off with Maddie Buckets. And just talk to me how you're feeling about the quarterback on this slate. Where are you looking?
Yeah, so I think you're going to have to nail the game stack, because one of these 3 games is going to go off. You've got 2 defenseless teams in Houston and Detroit facing off in the early game of the day. So it's definitely going to be the popular game, which is nice, because by 3 o'clock in the afternoon whether you're drawing dead on your Houston Detroit stacks or not. And then you can go ahead and get creative and pivot if your teams are dead and get on some low owned stacks, like maybe go go in on some Ravens against the Steelers or something like that in the later games. But there are both the Ravens Steelers game and the Houston Detroit game both have massive upside in terms of game stacks. I mean, it's 4 offenses which really 3 offenses that are good, and then you throw in the Lions. But the defenses, man, like Baltimore, they've been an okay defense this year, nothing great. And then the Steelers, we'll talk about them a little bit, especially when we get to the running back position. But I think Baltimore is going to have success against Pittsburgh, as they have in the last 3 times they've played them. But I think it starts with Desean Watson. I mean, Houston without David Johnson, they've really started to lean on Watson, and he's really turned that offense into his. And that with Randall Cobb getting hurt, I think we see this pass offense kind of start to funnel even more to the main guys than it has over the course of this year. So a lot of people, I think, are going to gravitate directly towards Keke Coutee, which we'll talk about him at the wide receiver position. But I think that could be a mistake, and he could be a little trappy. I think maybe you see an uptick in volume for Will Fuller and Cooks, and even a guy like Jordan Akins could step in and fill some of that void that Cobb is going to leave with his injury. So I really like Watson. You're just going to have to be different with the rest of your team if you play him, because he is going to be very popular. Stafford I really like as well if we do get Kenny Golladay in there. It's one of those things where when the star receiver is out, we always try to want to play that wide receiver 2 that's kind of could step in and fill his shoes. But really, when the star receiver's out, the top cornerbacks then shift to the wide receiver 2, and the wide receiver 2 is the wide receiver 2 for a reason. So we generally see a dip in efficiency on offense as a whole when the star players do miss. So both Golladay and Swift, I need both of them to be in for me to absolutely love this game. I will have Swift on every team, assuming he clears the concussion protocol, but I guess that's yet to be seen. So if he's out, but Golladay plays, I really like Stafford here, and I think with everybody playing Watson, I think you can get a lower owned Stafford than you should against a Houston defense that's given up 400 total yards in 5 of their games, and they even gave up a 600-yard game a couple of weeks ago to Tennessee. That was a fun game for me, because that Tennessee Houston stack that week is what won me all the money. So I do enjoy stacking up the Houston games here every once in a while, but. And then I do think the third QB I really like this week is Big Ben. Over the last few weeks, they've been among the top of the league in pass rate, both in situation neutral, but also the big thing for me has been they've played the Bengals and the Jaguars the last 2 games, and they've won both games very easily, but yet they continue to throw. And so it tells me they're going to continue to lean on Big Ben in the 3-star receivers that they have there in Pittsburgh. And we're starting to see a shift away from James Conner and more to just letting Big Ben just chuck it. And so I think, the Ravens do have good cornerbacks, but they've also given up a good amount of points this year. And Ravens games have been a bit of a shootout each and every week. So I do like that Pittsburgh-Baltimore game as well.
I love it, Maddie. I love it. Yeah, I'm curious to see what Watson's ownership is going to be. You're talking about him being the highest priced quarterback on DraftKings. I believe he is too on FanDuel, Ben, and feel free to correct me there if I'm wrong. But, with him being the highest priced and then also, in a good spot, it is the early game. I just feel like people want to lock in the production early, say, let me get Desean, let me get a pass catcher with him, bring it back with somebody else. So I just feel like the ownership there is going to be way inflated. And not to say that he's not a good play, because I love Desean as well too. But like you were saying, Maddie, it will be important to make sure that you're looking at the rest of your team, getting it right. And then also, we can talk about this as we go into the pod, but a lot of stuff with what we talked about in the past couple of years that we've been on the Thanksgiving slate is like monitor your teams, right? Late swap is there for a reason, and people will set their lineups at 11:30 or 11:29, and they'll forget about them. And Kev was, talking about Christian Blake last year for the Falcons with Julio Jones being questionable leading up to that point, and being able to pivot onto guys, not to say that will happen, but just to pivot in places will be huge, especially if you're playing Watson and he's popular. So, Ben, why don't you talk to us and tell us what you're looking at the quarterback position and how you're feeling about the slate early on this week?
Yeah, for me with the top-down process, it all comes down to the Texans and Lions. And I think that both quarterbacks are in really good spots. And I want exposure to both quarterbacks, whether I'm actually playing both or I just have pass catchers for both. I'm with Maddie that obviously if DeAndre Swift is in, I definitely want to play him. And I think that helps the offense as a whole. But regardless, this is just such a good matchup. The Texans are 22nd in pass defense. I'm sorry, guys. Just go to D, bro.
You good?
I do want to add
here, we chilling.
Real quick. I do want to add.
Oh, talk to us, Maddie.
Just Ryan, on your note about Watson being chalk, despite his high price tag, if you look at the running back and the wide receiver position, the highest price running back is Zeke at 6,800, and the highest price wide receiver is McLaurin at 7K. So people are not going to have an issue jamming him in. So I just wanted to throw, roster construction is not going to be a problem.
Well, and D, bro, as you get into these quarterbacks, man, talk to me about this DraftKings pricing, bro, because it feels a little soft, man. We had been getting to places where I felt like they were tightening it up, right? Giving us some real greatness here as we're getting into building these lineups. And I'm looking at these prices, and this is my first time, I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm looking at this and I'm like, wait, I can click on this player and this player and this player. They all at the top. They fit. So what the hell are we doing? I mean, what's going on here?
I mean, I don't know. It looks like maybe they were drunk when they made these prices. I mean, this all feels just so soft, man. I mean, you got you're stacking up Watson, and you could put Will Fuller at 6,400 and Brandon Cooks. They're still dismissing this man at 5,300. This is all egregious. It looks like somebody just got drunk and said, all right, so those week 12 prices? Are the week 11 prices? Let's just run those back, man. We ain't got to change shit. Let's just go. Let's go. Because, there's so many, even Deontay Johnson's still 6,200. The man gets 37 targets a week. What does he have to do to sit there and get priced up? I don't understand this. But the pricing feels ridiculously soft. I feel like we're going to be able to make some all-star teams here, which is going to make it really interesting. If you feel you're going to have to take some stands on players and trying to be different with your builds, and if pricing is not going to be a problem, how are you going to be different with your builds in these spots? Are you going to full game stack some? Are you going to run 3 pass catchers with Watson instead of 2? Or some quarterbacks, and what are your mini correlations around those stacks going to look like? I think that's part of what we're talking about overall lineup construction, where some of this kind of comes into play, where it's not just all right, fine, let's play all the dudes. Well, some of the dudes might be in bad spots. So, I mean, even look, come on, man. Lamar Jackson at 6,800. I understand he hasn't been great this year, but damn, man, that's crazy. Quarterback pricing on this just feels so stupidly flat. You got 3 dudes sitting in the mid 5Ks, and we haven't even discussed Andy Dalton here yet. And
I was going to ask, is there a reason to play Dalton? Because he's only, a 1K cheaper than the other guys?
I mean, so part of it depends on how you look at that game script for Stafford. I can make you a case to play Dalton over Stafford because the weapons are better. The pace in that game is going to be sneaky good. Washington's been pace up all year with a good defense or opposing defense on the other side. Dallas isn't going to stop anybody. Kirk Cousins just carved them the hell up. You think McLaurin can't do that? I know Logan Thomas isn't great, but Dallas sucks ass versus tight ends. So I think that you're looking at pricing and you're looking at some guys, if everybody's going to go to the top, if any of these games disappoint, everybody wants to jam in Lamar Jackson, we want to go with Watson, even Big Ben. I understand all of that, but I think Dallas and Washington is a really good game environment. I think Washington's defense isn't as good as people have been letting on. Kendall Fuller in the last few weeks has been beatable. I think the pace is good there. I can make you a case to go to Dalton at his price tag, and I understand we're talking about pricing is so soft here, but there's also, if pricing is soft and you can jam in all the dudes, if any of those games disappoint at all, then you're also looking at what? Maybe a lower owned Andy Dalton?
Yeah, no, and you talk about it there. I mean, look at last week. He came back, and Ben, we were actually having a conversation about this of just Andy Dalton coming off the COVID list and reports. Schefter was reporting it that might not be like feeling like himself, and just it really took a toll on him. And so he comes back, but he's putting up 20 DraftKings points when he comes back. He's hitting Amari Cooper, hitting Zeke, hitting CeeDee Lamb, hitting Gallup, hitting Schultz. I mean, the weapons that he has are just, in abundance there. And so you're looking at this team. And Derek, just to talk about that game, I do think that the Washington football team will get some traction as defense in that game. So by playing, Andy Dalton on that side, and the pricing is soft, so maybe people will go to Steelers at the top and they feel comfortable doing that. But I really think that they'll think, okay, Chase Young on that side, and those guys get sacks. Like, I think that that's a way to kind of get, sneaky. And there's very good correlation there, because a lot of people will look at Terry McLaurin being at the top of the slate, looking in a good matchup and say, okay, I just want to play him ISO, right? Not just taking the whole game environment to effect. And you can take a pass catcher or two, or Dalton, Zeke, and a pass catcher, stacking with McLaurin, and already you're starting to build contrarian stacks with, possibly leaving money on the table too, because of how pricing is. So I think a lot needs to be said there, especially with that being the second game on the slate. I feel like those middle games always go a little bit overlooked. And when you have a game environment like Baltimore and Pittsburgh on the end, bookmark with in the front, Houston and Detroit, that game's sneaky to me as well too.
Let me
Kev, go ahead, Ben.
Let me try to put my anxiety at ease here. And that's actually a leverage spot that I like, is Washington's defense. I was surprised with how Andy Dalton played last week, but I do think Washington's defense is pretty legit. And after Dallas looked really good last week, I think it's a recency bias, play a little bit. And it kind of correlates with what Maddie said. To me, as I said earlier, the Texans and Lions is by far and away the best game on the slate. And then Ravens and Steelers is second. So I want to get my defense from Washington Cowboys if I can. And I really do like Washington because their front seven is bad. I mean, obviously they just really hurt Burrow, which sucks. And then just going back to the top of the leaderboard, like I was saying earlier, I think Desean Watson, yes, you always have to think about ownership, especially on a 3-game slate. But there are obviously different ways that you can get unique exposure. We've talked about that already. By far and away, I think Watson is the best quarterback play on the slate, because we see now in 2020, these dynamic quarterbacks are dominating fantasy football. Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson. Desean Watson is right there. And I think that we're forgetting a little bit how good he is just because the Texans haven't been good. But if you look at what he's done since Bill O'Brien's dumbass got fired, he's been just dominating, and he's been their entire offense. I think I saw a report that the owner took him out to dinner last week, asked him who he wanted to be the next head coach. I mean, this is the guy. And there's no reason to play themselves out of a bad draft pick because they don't have the draft pick. Miami has it. So Watson's just kind of on a YOLO tour, and the Lions are fucking awful. They're so bad. So I don't think you overthink it, and my main team will have Watson, and then we can get contrarian with the stack. But then back to the Stafford thing, I think that there's fun leverage to be had with Stafford because Stafford's a fucking baller, and it depends on the offense. If their offense is super banged up, that sucks. But what I was trying to get at is I still want some exposure to this offense because the Texans defense is still trash too. They're 28th in overall defensive DVOA. They're 22nd in pass DVOA. They're dead last in run DVOA, which is why we want Swift back. If Swift is back, he's a lock. But I want some exposure. And then like you talked about, then it depends on what happens. If you're making a ton of teams, of course you want to diversify, but you'll know early what your lineups are going to look like, and then you can pivot if need be. But I definitely think if I'm ranking these games, Texans Lions from a fantasy standpoint is way up there. And then you got a notch down to Ravens and Steelers and another notch down to Washington and Cowboys, because Watson and Stafford can both get it done. And the defenses are just so awful that it's just such a really, really good atmosphere for fantasy points.
Ben, I'll push back just a little bit. I think Washington and Dallas is number 2 for me. I think that game. I think that game it has a lot of different factors, man. The Cowboys' corners are absolute dog shit. They're terrible. I think the pace is going to be really good in that game. I think that. I mean, Dalton last week he threw for 200 yards and 3 tutties. Like if he could have had a 4th with CeeDee Lamb if he wouldn't have sailed it. If he can get above 25 points, which I mean he would have been there if he'd have got any other touchdown. And there's a lot of different factors, and I think a lot of people are going to rank that game really low, but there's a lot of sneaky things that I like about that because, yes, I will not debate. I think Washington's front line is legit really, really good. But we did see, Dallas run blocked extremely well in a bad spot versus the Vikings. They moved Zach Martin to tackle last week, got a little bit of better offensive line play. I think that it's still ingrained in all of our heads that Andy Dalton played absolutely terrible, like a damn deer in the headlights versus the Cardinals, that I think that there's still a lot of things about that game that I really, really like.
And to your point, I did see that Anthony Brown, the cornerback for the Cowboys, is probably going to miss, which obviously makes me like Terry McLaurin. If there's anybody from that game that I like, it's Terry McLaurin, other than Washington.
Yes.
Yeah. No, McLaurin is in a great spot. And I think a lot of people will try and figure out ISO plays to island plays in that Baltimore and Pittsburgh game so that they have some PMR, minutes remaining left on their teams. They're not going to want to be done by the time that game comes around. And so it'll be interesting to see how builds get to. Kev, we haven't heard from you, man. Godfather, talk to us, child. Please get in here. And let us know what you're doing at quarterback. I have a funny feeling that we're going to be surprised here, but you could fool me.
Well, obviously the first game is definitely.
And you already fooled me because you're. Oh, there you go.
I said the first game that we have here is the one that we are obviously going to want to play, right? But the thing that worries me, I'll say this, is because if Golladay doesn't play and DeAndre Swift doesn't play, I want no part of I want really no part of the Lions because the Lions and we still haven't even talked about the fact that Stafford has a torn ligament in his thumb. Yep. So that is obviously another issue with that offense.
Great point.
If that offense has nobody, you're not afraid of their run game at all. We just saw it, right? The Panthers have a terrible run defense as well. You run against them, and they couldn't do a fucking thing on the ground. Adrian Peterson is dust. Kerryon Johnson is still Kerryon Johnson. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how, I feel like this game, though, could go different directions of what people think that it does. I still like Desean Watson. Desean Watson is probably, and there's a reason he's the most, high-priced quarterback on this slate. If you just look at him, he's second in passing yards. He's second in passing yards over the last 6 weeks. Overall, he's 6th in passing yards on the season. He has 4 300-yard passing games over his last 6 games. He's 9th in total air yards, 8th in deep ball attempts, 9th in air yards. 6th in deep ball completion percentage. He also gets it done on the ground. He's 6th in carries, 8 red zone carries, 7th in yards, and 1 rushing touchdown on the season. So there is a ton to like here with Desean Watson. And I think you can stack him with Will Fuller. I think you can stack him with, with Brandon Cooks. I think you can stack him with both of them. And then, if you don't want to run him back with anybody, I don't think this is the type of slate you have to run him back with anybody. Because I think there's a chance here that you don't really need to run him back with anybody. Kind of like people did probably last week with Justin Herbert, right? Where people weren't running him back, or doing a run back on the Jets side because there was really nobody there you liked. And I think that's something you could do because I do think, I honestly, the Baltimore Steelers game, I think to me could end up being the best game on this entire slate. Yep. I know that it's a division rival, and I know that when we look at this and we say, these games are usually really close, tight contested games, but there is factions on both sides of this game. One, the Steelers defense has, to me, the question with him is what can you do inside the red zone? Because from the 20 to 20, they can be had. Their corners are good. I wouldn't say they're elite. I think all of them have been average for the most part this year. But once they get down inside the red zone, they really clamp down. The same thing against the run, right? And we'll talk about that with the running backs. They've given up rushing yards this year. They just gave up 70 to James Robinson. In this very same game we saw a couple weeks ago, or however long it was ago, 247 rushing yards that this team allowed. Like every single week, they're giving up rushing yards, but once they get down to the 20, they clamp down and they tighten down. They allow teams to do whatever they want from 20s to 20s, and then they clamp down inside the red zone. So the question is, though, for me, with somebody like Lamar, is he's going to have to throw the ball in this game. Because if you look at, they're not going to have J.K. Dobbins. They're not going to have Mark Ingram. They're going to have basically Gus Edwards, which is a problem because when you put him out there, he does not catch passes. So when you have him out there, the teams are not going to be worried about you trying to throw the ball because he is not out there to as a pass catching running back. In the last 2 years, he has like 6 receptions, okay, and like 8 targets. Like he's not a pass catcher at all. And so if you put Justice Hill out there, I don't think he's somebody you want and pass blocking either. So the question is can Baltimore throw the ball? Because if Baltimore is not able to get their running game going, which has been their biggest problem, right? Because I think like somebody like Marquis Brown could be the actual slate breaker. And somebody that is going to be super low owned. The guy's been absolute trash so far this year, really over the last month and a half. But he's somebody, in my opinion, that can kind of break this slate, that could go off for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and nobody has him. But in this game, I feel like that the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game has so many better avenues, I think, to where for fantasy points. And you're right. I think everybody's going to want to play this early game, and they're going to want to get in some Amari Cooper or some CeeDee Lamb and Terry McLaurin. And you're not going to have many people that really stack this last game because it's the last game and everything else. And I think that's a mistake. And I think this could actually be the best game on the slate where we're looking at a 31-28 type of game at the end of it. And I think so for me, to get a little contrarian on a 3-game slate, that's the game I want to attack.
But that's what I mean, Kev, is I don't really want to play many players in that middle game, to be honest. And I love what you said because, yeah, we have to remember that Stafford has the injured thumb. And if there's a ton of players that are hurt, if Golladay doesn't come back, if Amendola doesn't come back, if Swift doesn't come back, I definitely want to have some Marvin Jones. But obviously he probably will be somewhat chalky since it's a 3-game slate. So I think you can play the domination stack with Watson. That's how good Watson has been. And you don't have to stack him with just 2 players. I think Maddie already threw his name out there. I like Jordan Akins as a tight end play. Kiki QT will be relatively low owned. So you can go with a triple stack, or you can wait because people don't like to usually wait. And Steelers Ravens, division game, we think it won't be that high scoring. I said it's my second favorite game for a reason. And I do think you bring up some interesting points about Lamar Jackson because you look at with their running backs going to be out, this falls on Lamar Jackson. And you have to kind of make tough decisions based on how many lineups you're making. And you have to decide for yourself whether you think Lamar is going to be able to get it done or not. And I have serious questions about that. However, if he does, they're fighting for their playoff life right now, and they don't really have anything else. So not only is he going to have to get it done through the air, which he has done from time to time. I mean, he looked good against the Patriots. Everybody does, but that was in the rain. So he has proven he can do it. And of course, they're going to need his legs as well. Again, like we talked about, J.K. Dobbins and
Mark Ingram.
Thank you. Both out. Nick Boyle out, which I think is the 100% most underrated injury because no one, was going to talk about that because it's Nick Boyle. But we have to remember that the Ravens offense last year got it done with 3 tight ends. Hayden Hurst is now in Atlanta and Nick Boyle's on IR. That's partly why I think we see Willie Snead getting more usage because let's be real. Marquis Brown could pop off, but he hasn't done it all year because Lamar Jackson loves to throw down the middle of the field. So that increases Mark Andrews' usage now that there's no second tight end. That increases Willie Snead's usage. I mean, Des Bryant came in, played half the snaps, and got 5 targets last week. So there's pieces there for Lamar Jackson to get it done, and he's going to have to. But I have questions about that, and so I think, this is the more obvious route. I'm looking at the Steelers side of the ball, and obviously we know what the wide receivers have done there, especially Deontay and Chase Claypool. And I think maybe, it's good to kind of move into the running backs because James Conner continues to be a tournament play. I think he'll be a tournament play again on this slate because it's a 3-game slate. I liked him last week, and Benny Snell gets the touchdown, and that's something that you have to worry about. But he still plays the majority of the snaps. He's still on one of the best offenses in this slate, and the running back position is ass, which is why I think that maybe I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on Zeke Elliott, because I think to me he's a very interesting fade in tournaments, especially on FanDuel, where usage doesn't matter as much. Touchdowns do. And just going back to hammer the point, and then I'll shut up. This Texans and Lions game, even if you don't want to go crazy with pass stacks, the Lions have given up the most DraftKings and FanDuel points to the running back position this year on both sites. And the Texans have given up the third most FanDuel points and DraftKings points on both sites. So from a running back position standpoint, to get exposure to my favorite game and also be a little bit contrarian, obviously that's not going to be the case if DeAndre Swift comes back. Everybody will be on that. But that makes me like Duke Johnson. Again, it's a 3-game slate. Duke Johnson, 16.7 opportunities per game over his last 3, played on 77% of the snaps last week, and he could catch a touchdown from Watson. So that's a contrarian way to get a stack in there. Watson doesn't throw to his running backs that much, as we know Lamar Jackson doesn't, but he can do it and he will do it. And we know Duke Johnson can catch passes. So I'm looking at some running backs there. I'm looking at James Conner, and I'm looking to find ways, as I haven't started to make my builds, to fade Zeke, because honestly, I'll just go back to it real quick. Washington defense is kind of my recency bias. Oh, Cowboys are good again. Nah, I think Andy Dalton could come out and suck. And if you play Washington D and you think that Washington wins this game, which that's my contrarian thought process right now, then Antonio Gibson makes sense from a game flow standpoint. But if you think the opposite, then J.D. McKissick, especially on DraftKings, is in play.
Yeah, preach to him, Ben. Preach to him. A lot to unpack there. So let's talk about these running backs and talk about Zeke and what you do, because he is the highest price. He comes in at 6,800, and I feel like people want the safety at the running back position. And with how soft the pricing is this week, how can you, especially, let's not even, I don't even want to get into a Swift is on the slate and then people playing both of them. If Swift is out, that is going to up the Zeke ownership immensely.
80%.
Because you're looking, probably, well, it depends on the tournaments. I feel like, if you're in large fields, I think it's well over 60% for a running back, because you're looking at the guys who are priced around him, at least on DraftKings, and it's Connor and it's Gibson, which, on DraftKings, I still feel like people have a hard time playing Gibson, even though he's had 2 strong showings because of the snap share that McKissick is seeing and because he catches passes. So people, I feel like, look at Gibson's upside as being limited. So they're looking at Zeke being there. And even though Tony Pollard scored the touchdown last week and he's not getting near as significant as run, but he's still getting spelled for Zeke. I think he's
still playing.
You're looking at Zeke catching. Yeah, you're looking at Zeke getting 2 targets, 3 targets, 2 targets, 2 targets. So I think people will just talk themselves into playing Zeke in that game and moving out. So at the running back position, it's really interesting because, like I said, Elliott, Swift, Connor, Gibson are your 4 running backs priced 6,000 and above on DraftKings. And then you have the likes of Duke Johnson, as Ben, you were alluding to, in a favorable matchup here against Detroit, who has not been able to stop running backs at all.
They're just so bad.
McKissick still in that same game. And then if Swift is out, we have the roulette again of Peterson and Kerryon Johnson getting into the fold. And now Peterson looked dusty last week. He looked like ass. Only had like 7 carries, I believe, or whatever it was. Kerryon Johnson came in, was the pass-catching back. And Kev even talked about him kind of being that pass-catching back last week if Swift was being ruled out, to play him at the minimum. And he, 5 points, that's not, what you're looking for really, but he is 4,300 just off the minimum. You're talking about a leverage play. If he somehow finds his way into the end zone, he could, be an interesting play there. So there is some interesting things. And then we got Gus Edwards, who's 4K, who will get some traction there. So it makes it really interesting because as we're talking about this on a Monday, let's say Swift is out. So your people are playing Zeke and they're playing Gus Edwards cheap. And so they can play Watson and they play all the receivers. They play Mark Andrews at tight end and they play the Steelers D and they just log out. Or, Swift is in, you're playing 3 running backs, and that's not really showing us, this year, wide receiver in the flex has been very key to winning tournaments. And now we're on a slate where running back is ugly, but if you get Swift in, you have Zeke, you have Connor there. I really could see people playing 3 running back builds, and you could even get leverage just by having a wide receiver in your flex. So let's talk about this. Go ahead, Ben.
And I think we talked about it, I think, before we started recording. I think it's a 4 wide receiver week, even on FanDuel. It obviously makes more sense on DraftKings, but even on FanDuel, I think it's a 4 wide receiver week. And that makes me even more excited about potentially fading Zeke, because there will be people that want to play 3 running backs. If they do, they're definitely playing Zeke. And, I've already kind of belabored the point, but I just think Washington's defense, especially their front 7, is legit. They're 7th in overall defensive DVOA. They are middle of the pack and run DVOA, as Minnesota was, and Zeke had a good game last week. So, of course, he could, but I just think on a 3-game slate, he'll be so high owned. And it's a great point, Ryan, about if DeAndre Swift does not play, because I was surprised to see that Kerryon Johnson played on 70% of the snaps last week, per Football Guys. So if we think that the game script will be somewhat the same, and even though I think Stafford's a baller, Patricia just sucked. I mean, Patricia is literally Bill O'Brien. So I think Watson balls out and wins again. And so if that's the case, then you're probably going to see a lot of carry on again. And that's another way to get interesting exposure, because at least for me, my main inclination is I want at least 2 Watson pass catchers. In some of my builds, I want at least one Stafford pass catcher. I talked about that. And then, of course, I'm playing at least one of these Steelers wide receivers on at least most, if not all, of my teams. I mean, they're too good. Pick your poison. But so that leads to only 2 running backs. And I think that makes sense as well, because I don't really like the running backs on this slate.
Maddie, talk to us about running back, because you've been a guy, we've had numerous conversations this year on the Degenation pod about how running backs have disappointed, right? Like how they are just not hitting in the same ways, at least the high priced running backs, where you have to have these guys, and the past couple of weeks, I guess it's worked out. Dalvin Cook last week, he gets 29 points or whatever it was, in the high 20 range. And that kind of works out because nobody else got there. And then the other week, you had Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara kind of getting there, but at low ownership, because people, didn't want to play them. It was late ruled in, and people are looking for safety. And so when we're talking about safety here, you're looking at this slate and you're saying, okay, where can I just be safe and get my 15 to 20 points at the running back position and move on and get my big scores from wide receivers? So how is that factoring in for you at all when you're looking at teams that you can make this week?
So I do want to say that I think when you analyze the running back position, it's different on a 3-game slate as it is from an 11 or 12-game slate, right? So you have those full slates. You're looking for guys who can go out and put up monster 25 to 35 point games. That's not going to come from guys that are, priced 4K, that are, go Adrian Petersons of the world, or maybe Gus Edwards against the Steelers. Like you're not going to get those monster games out of those guys. So what you got to do on a 3-game slate is you've got to find guys who are going to get locked into volume. They're going to be involved, and you've just got to try to luck box into the touchdowns and the production. Because, there's only 3 games, and like we were talking about earlier today in our group chat, there's really only 3 or 4 running backs who we would even consider on a full slate of this bunch. And one of them is DeAndre Swift, who might not even play. So you kind of have to take a step back and look at it. And that is why I do have interest in Gus Edwards. And so if you look at the matchup with Pittsburgh, they do rank, the bottom of the leaderboards in terms of rushing production allowed this year. But you look at the teams they've played have not been very good at running the football. So you've got the Giants, the Broncos, the Texans. Miles Sanders had 80 yards on only 11 carries earlier this year. The Browns had an okay game against them. The Titans, Henry had an okay game. I think he went for 75 and a tutty. And then you look at the last 4 weeks. The last 4 weeks are what have really been a red flag for me looking at the Steelers defense. So you've got 4 weeks ago, this same Ravens offense that they're about to face ran for 265 total yards against them on 47 carries. 47. the Ravens are already a team who do not want to let Lamar throw the ball. And I know we talked about how they may be forced to in this spot because they are without Mark Ingram and they are without J.K. Dobbins. But I do think they are still going to run the ball a lot. I think you're going to see over 30 attempts at least. Most of them are going to come from Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards leads the Ravens in red zone rush attempts, even with Ingram and Dobbins active. Edwards has 13, and both Ingram and Dobbins have 11 each. And then you look at the routes run. So Dobbins obviously leads the team because he's the best pass catcher by far. He's got 158 routes run. And then second on the team in routes run is Gus Edwards at 59 routes. So I know he's only seen 7 targets this year, but he has been out there running routes, and he's going to be the main guy. They're not going to just turn it over to Justice Hill. They've already shown us that Gus Edwards is an important part of their offense and what they want to do on a weekly basis, even when they're fully healthy. So I think you see a guy who sees probably 80 to 85% of the running back opportunities this week. He's minimum price. And then you look at, again, the Steelers over the last 3 games, not even including that 265-yard outburst from Baltimore 4 games ago. They rank second worst in the league in terms of yards per carry at 5.2. They gave up 144 rushing yards to Dallas 3 weeks ago. They gave up 139 rushing yards to the Bengals 2 weeks ago, which had Giovanni Bernard, Travion Williams, and Samaje Perine. Like, you're giving up 140 rushing yards to those guys, and then 73 rushing yards to the Jaguars last week. So I don't think it's as bad of a spot as we think it is just by looking at it on paper. And then you throw in the fact that the Ravens have one of the more dominant offensive lines, and they can just run the ball on really anybody, which they showed us 4 weeks ago in this same matchup. So I really like Edwards. I just think that the opportunities are going to be there. He's min priced. I am curious to see what his ownership does get up to, because if it gets very high, that is when I will, kind of back off of him a little bit, because I do think this slate in particular, there are a lot of different ways you can go with this slate to be different. And I really don't want to force myself to play a chalky guy, especially like Gus Edwards. And then if you look at the top, like you guys mentioned, I hadn't really thought about fading Zeke, but the more you guys talk about it, it does make a lot of sense. He's easy to fit in. You run the ball in Washington. It is a good matchup there. But if the Cowboys offense does struggle, which they have ever since Dak has been out, I mean, Zeke's first 100-yard game was last week. He's averaged seven 100-yard games every year that he's played, and his first one this year was last week. And the Washington defense, I mean, they have been a solid unit all year. They don't really give up a ton of points. The production against them does come on the ground, but I think, you just kind of bite the bullet. Duke Johnson, he's going to get a lot of work. He's going to see 16 to 20 opportunities. Gus Edwards, I expect to see in the same range of opportunities. They both cost way less than Zeke does. And it allows you to fit in Watson and Will Fuller and Terry McLaurin. And you can pay up for Mark Andrews if you want to go that route. So, running backs gross. I just think this week is different. And I just wanted to hammer on Gus Edwards and why I do think he's a good play despite the matchup with the Steelers.
2 things. One, I just feel like some people will look at, Zeke gets to play Washington, lock it in. And again, I think that if you look at the numbers and you just look at their defense, they're better than people will give them credit for, because, they're Washington, they're bad. Yeah, their offense sucks, but their defense is really good. And I have legitimate questions about if Andy Dalton can continue to keep it going. I think that your points were fantastic about Gus Edwards. I didn't realize, I hadn't gone back and looked at their first game, how much success they had against the run against the Steelers earlier this year. Because again, kind of what I was saying about how we know Lamar, as much as we want to make Marquis Brown happen, and he could, we know he loves to throw the ball down the middle of the field. Well, what else did the Ravens do? They run the ball. And I just went back and looked because I remember being surprised over the last month, like hearing Gus Edwards' name so much, even before the breakout last week. The 4 games before that, for Edwards, 13 opportunities per game. And back to your first point, Maddie, like on a 3-game slate, any running back that's getting 13 opportunities per game, and now you mean to tell me he's probably going to get more touches because he's going to be the main guy? He's absolutely in play. And I just think I question how chalky he will get. I get he's super cheap, but I think a lot of people will do the opposite of the Zeke and Washington thing and just be like, oh, against the Steelers, no, I can't do it. Especially because we don't want running backs that don't catch passes. Like, that's not the sexy thing. But for Baltimore's offense, we know that that's a huge component. He'll get the touches. And like you said, if you have anybody on a 3-game slate that falls into the end zone, especially if they're relatively-ish low-owned, and they're affordable and it frees you up to do other things, they're in play. So I love what you said, because that just kind of adds a little bit more fuel to my fire about potentially fading Zeke. Now, I'm going to be making multiple teams. It's Thanksgiving, of course. I'm probably not going to fade Zeke on all. That would be a little ridiculous because you want to diversify. But I just do think that the theory makes sense, especially when we are now being given a guy like Gus Edwards, who's going to be getting the touches. And I talked about Duke Johnson and everything else before. So,
yeah. So the way you look at, I think the Ravens, so it's kind of a 3-pronged thing, right? So they want to give their running backs a ton of work. They throw in like a 42% pass rate, which is, I think, either the lowest or second lowest in the league. They don't want to turn it over to Lamar. So one of 3 things has to happen. Either Gus Edwards gets the majority of touches, Justice Hill steps in, and the Gus Edwards only sees a slight bump, and Justice Hill takes on a massive role, which could happen. I don't think it does, but there is a path to that happening. Or 3, Lamar Jackson throws a ton. And if Lamar Jackson throws a ton, you are going to see I think you would see a Marquis Brown explosion game. But I don't know that that's the route they go, considering the success that they have had. Even if you go back to last year, the Steelers defense was the exact same defense, essentially. And last year, the Ravens ran for 138 yards and 223 yards on the Steelers. And then 246 this year. So, I mean, that's like 600 rushing yards in 3 games against them. So I think we know what their game plan is going to be, and whether or not it works. I'm willing to go down with the ship that, they're just going to try to run the ball.
So I'm just going to put the Justice Hill thing to bed. He's played 17 snaps on the year. Gus Edwards has played 205.
Yeah.
So I think you're galaxy braining a little bit if you do that. And I would throw in one more option there for the Ravens. Again, they're fighting for their playoff lives. Maybe they just say, screw it, Lamar, like, we're going to have you try to have the 100 rushing yard game. Exactly. And if they did that, I would argue that would help Edwards, because now they're driving down the field. Now the defense has to worry about, oh shit, Lamar's carving us up. Now all of a sudden, when they run read option, Edwards gets it. He's just up the gut for 15, 20 yards. So if they did that, I think that would even make things a little bit more exciting for their running game as a whole, which would help Gus Edwards.
Kev, talk to me about running back, where you're looking at before we move on to wide receiver here. It's we've had a conversation here because it is important, right? You have to get these running backs right. There's 2 spots on Draftkings and FanDuel, 3 if you include the flex, and so there's going to be mistakes that are made here, and we want to try and avoid those. So how are you going to try and avoid those on your lineups?
Avoiding Gus Edwards. So listen, Linda. All right. So here's a couple of things. One, I get what you're saying. All right. And some of the points you make, I will say are certainly valid. It is certainly a 3-game slate.
That's okay. That's progress from where we were at earlier today.
Okay.
So I will accept that as a small victory.
Hey, lower ownership percentage. I'm good.
But so I will say that. However, one, saying what Justice Hill's snaps are doesn't matter. You can throw that out because that doesn't matter for nothing. Whenever, I mean, they've had all the other running backs. They literally are just going to have Gus Edwards, right? Before they had J.K. Dobbins, who was the pass catching running back, and saying he run 59 routes is kind of worthless too. Whenever you're saying he averages 5 routes run a game, like it doesn't really matter. Like he's not out there running routes. You're just using it as a number, like because that number
basically
really doesn't.
It was saying he was second most behind Dobbins, which if you have Dobbins is gonna run the routes.
Right. But if you're only running 5 routes a game, I mean that's nothing. I mean.
No, I know, but that's with Dobbins. So
that's also with 3 running backs per week.
Yeah.
That's not just now it's 2. So just giving more context here. Anyway, go ahead, Kev.
So I will. He is 100% touchdown. He's 100% touchdown dependent. If he doesn't find the end zone, he's probably not going to work out for you, right? Like I said, I said it whenever we talk about quarterbacks, that if you look at the Steelers, that they have given up yards on the ground. It's certainly something that they've done. They have struggled with it. They are not as elite as people think, as whenever you just look at the base numbers to say what they've done against the ground. Mainly, they've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns on the entire year to running backs. So that has helped them in their numbers. So can I see a path that Gus Edwards gets 80 yards and a touchdown and 4K? Does it work out? Yes. However, if you go back and look in that game against the Ravens, or the Ravens-Steelers game, the Ravens got up. It was a 17-7 game at half. So at that point, they're able to the script is in their favor. They're able to do ground and pound the rock the entire first half for the most part, right? The Steelers scored early, and then after that, the Ravens kind of dominated. And that game, it really was not looking good for the Steelers until the second half when the Steelers really started to turn it on, which allowed them to do that. If it goes the other direction, which as of right now, when you look at the Ravens offense, like we're not seeing a whole lot from their passing attack that says that they're going to be able to do that. So if they're not able to score quickly and get up on the Steelers, that is where I find it a problem for Gus Edwards, because they're not going to keep pounding the rock with them. They're going to have to throw the ball, and I think they use Lamar Jackson as a running back, and he gets far more carries. And I think that then you bring Justice Hill onto the field, and he's going to get far more pass catching work, because that's what they're going to need him for. And so, to me, you have to tell yourself whatever story you think that how this game is going to go. I think it's far more likely that the Steelers get up early in this game and are forcing the Ravens to throw. And if that happens, that's how I think he fails. I will say, I think we also are. I haven't heard anybody talk about James Conner or really do much. I think he's a terrific play.
Well, thanks for joining us, Kev.
I brought him up earlier.
Well, I don't think there's been enough conversation about him.
Right.
I think, to me,
I'm just waiting.
I think he is actually the best running back on this slate. And it seems to be like he's the guy that kind of like, okay, he's been mentioned and he's been discussed, but like I think there's the path that he really is the best running back on the slate, as long as DeAndre Swift is out. If DeAndre Swift is in, it's DeAndre Swift. But if DeAndre Swift is out, I think it's James Conner. James Conner is a bell cow back. There's questions I can bring up about Ezekiel Elliott, because like one thing I'll say about him is he hasn't been getting targets lately. He's only got 9 targets the last 4 weeks. They've been giving it and saving it to Tony Pollard, and he's played last week. He only played 60% of the snaps. I think he's like the last 4 games. Like he's had one game where he's played over 80% of the snaps. He's been playing around the 60% mark, and Tony Pollard's become more involved in the offense. So that's why I'd be a little worried about him. But in terms of James Conner, Brandon Williams likely still going to be out. Calais Campbell likely still going to be out, which is a big problem for that Ravens run defense. The Ravens, if you look at them over the last 6 weeks, they have allowed the second fewest passing yards, but they've allowed the 6th most rushing yards on the ground. Like, this is a team you can certainly run the ball on. And so I think James Conner is being slept upon a little bit in terms of, like I said, I think he's the best running back on the slate, not named DeAndre Swift, if DeAndre Swift actually plays. 6,200, he's cheaper. I think you can do a lot with him. I think I would lock him in every lineup. Whether I want to run Big Ben or not, I still want him in my lineups because it's only a 3-game slate. And I think he's involved in the passing game. He's gonna see work in the passing game, which I love. Again, I think Duke Johnson's also a viable candidate. And I think Antonio Gibson, I think, is also I know he missed practice today, but it's a walkthrough. I don't care about that. But I think those are the guys for me. James Conner, DeAndre Swift if he plays, Duke Johnson, Antonio Gibson are the guys that I really want to play. And if I'm going to get weird, I'm going to play someone like Kerryon Johnson in the mindset that they're down, they're going to have to throw the ball, and he can luck box his way to the end zone. And that's it. I
love it. So you're on the fade Zeke potentially as well movement.
Yes, because I think he's going to be the highest owned guy on the slate. I think that this game, it looks a little gross to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I will say this as well. Like if you look at Dallas, like Dallas is actually the last 6 weeks, they're like they've only allowed like I think it's like the 8th or 9th fewest passing yards. But they've been terrible against the run. Now some of that's game script and how the games have went and stuff like that.
Some of that's crappy ass quarterbacks they played too.
Right. And
because Cousins ripped them in half.
I would argue they've actually been better
Alex
against
Smith.
the run recently.
Yes.
Because I mean, Dalvin scored 29 points, but a lot of that was through the air. Off the top,
and that's
of my
behind
head.
a top 2 to 3
a
run blocking line.
Yeah, top 3 run blocking line, and he struggled. Right. He struggled. He barely got over the 100-yard mark, which for Dalvin, he consistently gets over the 100-yard mark. So, you know, I think Dallas's run defense is what's been the more improved thing, and I think the Washington, if they're going to have success, will be through the air, and that's. We haven't talked about receiver yet, but Terry McLaurin, man, I'm going to have a lot of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Derek, talk to us about James Conner, because I know you were kind of high on him, and take it into the wide receiver for us as you spill out your running back thoughts as we head into wide receiver.
I mean, so I've been on the fade Zeke train all year long, and the reason I'm going to give some pushback to this is I feel like the Dallas offensive line blocked a shit ton better last week. Going against Vikings, the Vikings are 7th in open field yards allowed. Now, you look at Dallas walking into that week, they were 32nd in open field yards. Like, Zeke had like 1 or 2 15-yard runs of the entire fucking year. And walking into that matchup, I was on fade Zeke. Like, I don't want Zeke. People are like, oh, but his volume and stuff like that. And the dude runs for 100 fucking yards. Like, on a 3-game slate, we know he's going to get 20 to 25 touches. I don't care. I don't give 2 shits if he's the highest running back. Like, I think that, like, we need to look at overall lineup ownership and not worry about fading on. We're talking about how disgusting this whole damn slate is about running back. We got one running back that's going to get probably like 25 fucking touches.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking about, like, you know, maybe Dallas can win this game, maybe they don't, but like, we know he's going to get the damn ball. The rest of these dudes, we don't know about that. So like, I am not worried about Zeke ownership. What I'm worried about is, like, what do we see ownership and chalk construction? So if Gus Edwards is going to get a shit ton of ownership and I want to play Zeke, well, I'm going to have to differentiate. In my Zeke lineups, I'm not going to play Gus. In my Gus lineups, I'm not going to play Zeke. I'm not going to eat the chalk on the 2 most honed running backs in this whole possible slate. So on those lineups, I might run Gus and Conner. And yes, I know the negative correlation, but if both these teams want to keep the ball on the damn ground in a divisional game, in a home game for Pittsburgh where they're favored by 4.5 points, then Conner's set up, like, for all the reasons that Kev brought up. Like, I was big into Derrick Henry last week. You know, like, them missing 2 defensive linemen that we don't even know are going to be back this week. And yes, over the last 4 to 5 weeks, Baltimore has not been good. Like, even if those 2 defensive linemen were in, they are bottom of the league. Like, they're bottom 3. I haven't seen the metrics like after week 11, but walking into last week, they were 31st over the last 4 weeks in explosive run rate. Like, they were giving up chunk runs continuously. And so a lot of where I end up on running back is going to depend on, 1, do we get DeAndre Swift? Do we not? I'm guessing that we don't. And what do ownerships look like? And trying to leverage some of that and trying to leverage off some of the chalk. Like I said, if Zeke and Gus are the 2 highest owned dudes on the slate, then I'm not going to run them probably in the same damn lineup. But what I will do is I'll get off of Gus we'll get to wide receivers, but another 4K pass catcher on the Ravens that I love a lot. Or do I go with, say, Conner and Gus? So, I mean, looking at the running back position, I said that I like Zeke. I think that he's going to get a ton of work in this one. I do like James Conner, although we do need more news on the Ravens defensive line to know where I stand. Antonio Gibson is interesting. I know we got the report that he didn't practice, but it wasn't really a practice day. So what the hell do they do with that? I think that depending on what you're running at quarterback and how you're correlating your lineup, like if you're going with like Gibson and the Washington defense, that makes a ton of sense. Now, if you're going with like pass catchers and the Dallas side in your lineup, do you go McKissick in that one and you're thinking that Washington plays catch up? You know what I mean? I think like and this is all a long drawn out way to say that part of what I do with running back this week is going to depend on how I'm correlating my lineups and what I'm looking at from a whole lineup perspective and not just one-off plays or is this guy the highest owned? It's a fucking 3-gamer, guys. Like, I mean, I don't give a shit if a guy's 70% owned. Like, if he's 70% owned but he's in the winning goddamn lineup, then fine. So be it. that whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like because if Zeke gets there and every other damn running back fails, then you're screwed if you didn't play him. It doesn't matter if he's 70%.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean?
It's all about the ownership percentage as a whole of your roster. 100%. Like facts. Taysom Hill last week. I've been writing my articles on FanDuel, so I wanted to bring a little context to that as well. Like, obviously, everybody played Taysom Hill. It made all the sense in the world. I mean, that's the most obvious example, but you didn't think twice about that. And it didn't matter because you can play Curtis Samuel and these other type of guys and still have a lineup that is super contrarian and can take down a tournament. You can still do that on a 3-game slate. And if a guy goes off, a guy goes off. That's why I'm sitting here saying, like, Watson's going to be my quarterback. I could give a shit how high owned he is on my main team, at least. Zeke is 8,500 on FanDuel. James Conner is 6,700. So I just find the Conner thing fascinating just because I'm a big Conner fan. 14 opportunities per game the last 3 weeks. That's not bell cow usage. Zeke's up at 21.7 opportunities per game. They just haven't been running the ball that much. Could that change? Absolutely. And so I definitely want some Conner for sure, especially if we see that if Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams if they're out again, because they could division game, they could switch it up at any time and give James Conner more work because he's still their bell cow back. But in addition to the fact that, do they just keep throwing the ball because they're having a lot of success with that? Benny Snell is annoying as fuck. Like, I played James Conner last week knowing that Benny Snell was a vulture. He had done it multiple times, weeks in the past, and they did it again. They gave Benny Snell the ball on the one. So that's just super tilting if you have James Conner with 90 total yards, but Benny Snell steals the touchdown. So just something to keep in mind.
Don't forget the sweeps to Claypool too. The sweeps to Claypool on the
Eric Ebron's scoring all these touchdowns. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a good play for sure. And I just wanted to say that that's a perfect point, D-Bro. No matter what your slate is, it doesn't eating the chalk is perfectly fine as long as your lineup as a whole makes sense from a tournament perspective. Everything should tell a story, of course.
Well, and before we move on to like wide receivers and stuff, one point I want to bring up about Duke Johnson. So I have not played Duke Johnson at all this year, and I've not touched him.
Me either.
The one thing I want to bring up about Duke Johnson, because the more we've sat and we've talked about these plays, and one of the reasons I was off of Duke Johnson last week, and everybody's like, it's a great matchup on the ground game. And I'm like, well, then you should love Desean Watson even more. Then, like, if the offensive line can't block for shit, we've seen that all over this season. We've seen that play out for 11 damn weeks. They can't block for shit. But if the run defense is terrible, then you're looking at wide open running lanes. You're looking at missed tackles. Like, these are reasons why run defenses freaking suck ass. If that's the case, Desean Watson doesn't need his offensive line to block for a damn thing. He's going to take off. If that's the case, then we should love Desean Watson even more. And Duke Johnson, it's not really, hey, we should love Duke Johnson because Lions suck ass on the ground. We should love Desean Watson even more because they're terrible on the ground. Because last week, he outrushed freaking Duke Johnson. That could happen again this week, man. Like, like, I want to talk myself into playing Duke Johnson. The more and more we sat here and thought about it, I'm like, haven't we seen enough weeks of like wanting to play a Texans running back and they can't run block for shit and knowing that they're going to fail? And like, if they get at the goal line, then Desean Watson's just kind of call his own damn number. Like, at what point are we just like, all right, fine, baby. Like, that ship has sailed. We got to get off of that. If whatever we feel about on the ground game should flow towards more Desean Watson love.
I would just push back a little on that from the standpoint that it just goes back to what Matty D said at the beginning. It's a 3-game slate. Any running back, 16.7 opportunities per game over the last 3. And I'm pretty sure that first game, Ryan, you talked about it earlier against the Jags. David Johnson started that game, got hurt. Duke Johnson came in, had a good game, but saw like 20 opportunities, and he didn't even start because David Johnson hadn't gotten hurt yet. So that upside is there. Right. And the main point is that it's the Lions. Like, the Lions are that bad. They're a terrible franchise. They just scored 0 points against Carolina's good, but PJ Walker even making some boneheaded interceptions, they did nothing. Like the Lions are that bad, but that also adds to my excitement for Watson because I fucked up. I picked the wrong week last week to go with a single entry, and I came close. And I ended up not playing Watson, even though I loved him because their left tackle was ruled out and Gilmore came back. And it's like, well, let's look at the Patriots pass rush. Does it matter that their left tackle is out? The Patriots have no pass rush whatsoever. Let's look at the Lions pass rush. They've got a couple guys up front, but nothing that scares you. So Watson should have plenty of time to throw the ball. And then, like you said, D-Bro, he has the dual threat upside, which is why at the beginning when I was trying to talk, the Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, like this, Justin Herbert, this is the new NFL. And Desean Watson is right up there as a top 5 quarterback in the league. He can get you home in so many different ways. That's why I've said multiple times, I don't care what his ownership percentage is. He's my quarterback, and I'll get contrarian elsewhere.
To my point on these good running, like these good matchups that we've seen for Duke Johnson, because the Patriots, you can actually run on them, okay? Duke Johnson versus the Jaguars, 41 rushing yards. Duke Johnson versus the New England Patriots, 15 rushing yards. In both of those good running matchups, Desean Watson outrushed Duke Johnson, 50 yards. Against the Patriots, Desean Watson outrushed Duke Johnson, 36 yards on only 16 total carries. So if you love it, you should love Watson more.
It's because it's a 3-gamer. I've been with you. Yeah. I have not been into Duke Johnson. I was into David Johnson a little bit and realized that wasn't really that great of a goal. But it's a 3-gamer. But yes, like if Duke Johnson gets home, I will say this: he's like that's why I said earlier. It's a contrarian stack with Watson because he's probably going to either need to catch a touchdown or have at least 4 for 40 through the air because they just don't run the ball. Like I saw the craziest stat, you guys probably all saw it on Twitter, that like Watson has accounted for like 89% of the Texans yards, like the last 3, like ever since Bill O'Brien got fired. Like he is the squad. He is their entire team. He's putting their team he's putting the Texans on his fucking back. And because of that, it's just such an easy, yes, if you're making multiple teams, okay. But he's the obvious quarterback play, and then you go from there, in my opinion.
Let me hop on the James Conner thing real quick. Something I just looked up because you guys made me dig in a little further than I previously had. So when we play James Conner, we always think about freaking Benny Snell, freaking Claypool on the end around. So James Conner has had 34 red zone opportunities, and he has only 6 touchdowns. Benny Snell has 10 red zone opportunities and has 3 touchdowns. So he's been very efficient with his touches. And then you've got Claypool has four red zone rushing attempts, which are the end arounds, and he's got 2 touchdowns. So both Claypool and Snell have seemingly, it's every time they touch the ball, it's like they score. Whereas Conner, every time he touches the ball, he hasn't scored. So I think he's been a bit unlucky in that regard. And I think it's kind of like Clyde Edwards-Helaire did the same exact thing just last night. Yeah. So he's been getting all the opportunity, and it just hasn't worked out. And so I think Conner, I think he's a great play.
The problem.
Y'all smell that regression coming? I swear to God, I smelled something, and it smells like regression.
Let's go. I mean, he's absolutely due. You said something that surprised me. It surprises me to hear that James Conner has 6 touchdowns on the year because he hasn't scored in so long. So he's absolutely due. The main reason why I bring it up is because why does Benny Snell have 3 touchdowns? When they get to the 1, I don't know why Tomlin's decided this, but when they get to the 1, they give it to Snell a lot. But other than that, how often is that going to happen? Conner does catch passes. He's absolutely due. They're home favorites. They haven't lost a game. There's injuries to the Ravens. So, yeah, I'm with you guys. And it's such an easy way to fade Zeke on some teams as well. So, yeah. Good. I like it. I feel like we're somewhat in lockstep on the running back.
If we get all these guys, whether or not we get Swift or not, can we just say that people will want to click? I think they don't want to play Conner.
No, people don't want to play Conner.
Exactly. They don't want to.
No, I mean, because I just played Conner. I just played Conner in the smash spot. Stacked him with Steelers D. Steelers D put up 17. Conner was like 8% or 12% owned against the Jags of all, like the Jags who made, yes, I know Joe Mixon's not a thing anymore, but before Joe Mixon got hurt, 4 touchdowns against the Jags. Like, this is one of the best spots, and nobody's playing him then. And if
we haven't gotten to wide receivers yet, if the Steelers wide receivers come in, Maddie, we talked about this previously. If the Steelers wide receivers come in higher owned, and nobody wants to fucking play James Conner, and he's 10%, and the other wide receivers are 20%, 30%. And if James Conner gets 2 touchdowns and they get 1 or they fail, or this game gets slow, because the Ravens want to play slow. That is what they want to do. This is how you win 3 gamers.
And that's literally what I did last week, and I came close. It's like, okay, James Conner isn't getting like 14 opportunities per game. I would like more, and Benny Snell is the vulture, but at the end of the day, he is still playing like 69, 70% of the snaps. So rather than trying to play wide receiver roulette on a slate where these guys are going to be popular and Connor probably won't be, you can get a ton of exposure to the Steelers offense and do it in a way that's more predictable as long as that regression hits. And so that's why I loved it last week too, because you can get so much exposure to this game, not necessarily play the roulette, or do both and play multiple Steelers. So
dude, if you're playing, like we talked about this, a wide receiver in the flex thing, I'm going to push back on it for a second. James Conner is 6,200. Deontay Johnson is 6,200. Chase Claypool is 6,100. If he carries a third of the ownership versus these guys. What else?
Right.
Like, how do we spell leverage again? How does that word spelled?
The key man is playing actual good players at low ownership instead of shitty players at low ownership. And Connor's a good player.
So don't overthink. Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot to do at wide receiver. I mean, and Derek, I'll toss that back to you because I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying there with Zeke and just locking him in for the production that you're going to get. And I feel like a lot of people who are doing that, they're going to look at that and say, okay, if I'm playing Zeke's in that game script, how can I correlate that? I'm going to correlate it with McLaurin, and I can fit him, and it's a good matchup for him. So to get leverage off of that spot, you're looking at it. I mean, the 3 guys are just spelling right there as chalk. I mean, it's Monday, but I can already tell you, Terry McLaurin, Will Fuller, Deontay Johnson, like those are the guys that people are going to want to play at the spot, because even with Brandon Cooks being so cheap, Will Fuller, we know what his upside is. Terry McLaurin has been offering that upside, even with Alex Smith out there leading the league in air yards, having the massive ADOT. It's been ridiculous. And then Deontay Johnson is Deontay Johnson. In every game that he's been healthy this year, the dude has smashed. And so people are just going to look at those 3. With Kenny Golladay, if he gets ruled out, especially, and Juju's ruled out, especially, and just say, okay, I'm playing these guys, and what else can I do? So I wanted to talk to you first because you're playing Zeke. Are you looking at the Terry McLaurin correlation there? And granted, we're talking here about building multiple teams and not just building one team. And so you can talk about how your ownership is going to be spread across the field there. But I'm curious to see what you're doing at wide receiver this week.
I mean, it comes down to a lot of this, like, what do your stacks look like and what are you correlating with? Like, what quarterbacks are you playing? With wide receivers, that's all that comes down to. And, like, how do my mini stacks look like around my main stack and stuff? So, like, yes, can I, like, roll down this, like, laundry list of, like, really damn good wide receivers and tell you I'm going to play McLaurin, I'm going to play Fuller? Do I like Deontay Johnson and Claypool? Yes, I like them. Like, how the hell can you not? Now picking out certain different plays from games, I think is important on, are you going to take stands on certain players? Like, not locking them in, but outside of, we're talking about the roulette with like Deontay Johnson and Claypool and Juju and the whole Steelers thing. And when I was looking at that game, the thing that like stood out to me, and I got to pull this up real fast, is that the last time these 2 teams met, the Steelers tried to counteract, because if you look at the Ravens secondary, we know they're all freaking really damn good corners. The way that the Steelers tried to counteract some of this is they spread them the hell out. They ran 36% of their plays. They ran 4 wide and no running back. So they're trying to pull in another nickel corner running 4 wide receivers. That's why you see a guy like Ray McLeod get on the field. And so what that does is, if you look at what the Ravens have been doing with their cornerbacks, so like 2 wide receiver sets, you have Marlon Humphreys is on the outside, and you have
Jimmy Smith.
Jimmy Smith.
Nah, it's not. It's Peters. Jimmy Smith doesn't come on the field unless they're playing 3. So Humphreys and Peters play 2 wide receiver sets. When they go 3, Humphreys, even last week, I went back and looked at it. When they go 3 wide receiver sets, Humphreys goes into the slot. And you have Jimmy Smith comes in. So Humphreys rotates between right cornerback and slot cornerback. So if the Steelers, what they did last time is on 60% of their plays, they either ran 3 wide receivers or 4 wide receivers, trying to spread these dudes out. So when they go 4 wide, you have a guy like Terrell Bonds come into the game, and they try to pick on him or move wide receivers around to get them off of certain guys. And so Humphreys is a guy we don't want any part of. Like, I do not want to mess with that guy. I think that he's either going to see a lot of Juju and he's going to see a lot of Deontay. The guy I want to pick on in that matchup is freaking Marcus Peters. I want a ton of Chase Claypool. He has him on size. He has him on speed. Marcus Peters is like what we saw like tonight. He's like Jamel Dean. He tries to jump routes. He tries to get interceptions. Claypool can double move him out of his damn cleats and leave him crying on the fucking field. So I like Claypool in that matchup. I just never liked Marcus Peters, man. He's such a fucking punk. So I like Claypool if I'm picking out one wide receiver for the Steelers that I really, really want, and looking at what the Steelers did to try to counteract the Baltimore pass defense. But just going down the line, man, I mean, I could tell you, like, in spreading some love about Dallas and stuff like that, like, I'm not worried about Kendall Fuller has been beat. He started off the year playing extremely, extremely well. But if you look over the last few weeks, that dude's been able to get beat. Like, since week 6, he's had 27 targets. He's allowed 16 receptions and a 104 passer rating. He's given up 3 receiving touchdowns. So that's a big reason why I was on T. Higgins last week. Now, with all the Burrow injury and stuff like that, we didn't see any of that come to fruition. But I'm willing to go back there. And we know the deep targets. I think Gallup's going to see him a good bit. It does give me, because nobody wants to play freaking Michael Gallup. You know, I do have some interest in Michael. I played him last week too, man, and I'm going to go back to that because I think that he's one of the guys that if people are looking at Dallas, they're going to think of Amari, they're going to think of Lamb, and for good reason. But I think there are ways you can correlate, you can get Gallup in there, and if he goes off, we know his role is the deep role in this offense. If he's going to see Fuller, and Fuller's been able to get beat, I like him. And we talked about, at least we mentioned Marquis Brown. The guy that I want to bring up here in that matchup, we saw him go off last time, and the way that you attack the Steelers is either with one of two things. They're secondary. It's either with deep speed, and Marquis Brown, just him and Lamar have not been able to hook up this year, okay? So I'm not really relying on that. But the guy that nobody wants to play, he's the exact same price as Marquis Brown, is Willie Snead. And you look at every single matchup that Baltimore has had against teams that struggle versus the slot. Okay, so we go back to New England. Willie Snead had 64 and 2 touchdowns. Jonathan Jones has been god-awful in the slot for the Patriots. You go back to this Pittsburgh game. It doesn't matter because Mike Hilton came back. Him and Cameron Sutton in the slot are fucking terrible. He had 106 receiving yards in the last time these two teams played. That's not a freaking apparition, because in teams where they played, like good teams that actually suck versus the slot, he didn't do anything versus Philly, nothing versus Cincinnati or Washington. You go back to Kansas City, Tyrann Mathieu is really damn good. Now Houston, fine, I'll take the L on that one. But Cleveland, Kevin Johnson, like the Browns started off this season struggling versus slot wide receivers, 64 and a touchdown. Willie Snead is not a guy that anybody wants to freaking pick and put in their lineup. But you look at the last few weeks, it's not Marquis, it's getting the run. Willie Snead has 7 targets, 4 targets, 7 targets. And a guy that has 4,300, if people are going to go to Marquis for the perceived upside and still ride that train, I'm just going to play Willie Snead, man. And if he comes in at 10%, 20% versus Gus Edwards, who is going to be 4K, and if he's rostered 50 or 60%, and he's the uber mega chalk, Willie Snead at 4,300, if he goes for 100 or he gets 100 and a touchdown, then he's the leverage play.
I love it because I feel like I needed someone to talk me into it, but I already said it earlier that to me, like one of the most underrated offensive injuries this entire year is going to be Nick Boyle, just because of how the Ravens run their offense and where Lamar Jackson likes to throw the ball. Willie Snead popped up multiple times last year when they were balling. He's popped up multiple times this year. He played on more snaps last week than Marquis Brown. He has 6 targets per game over the last 3. Marquis Brown has 5. So, I mean, Snead, for the low ownership and the cheap play, you're kind of getting a wide receiver 1B ish, which is pretty crazy. So I do like that.
Second on the team in red zone targets too, behind Andrews.
Yeah. And now that Boyle's gone,
Boyle was third with 4.
Yeah, they were throwing. They like to throw their tight ends in the red zone with only one. I mean, it makes Mark Andrews more interesting too. But with only one tight end there now, Snead's probably going to get more of that work.
Yeah, I mean they're forced into 11 personnel, right?
You attack that secondary via the slot, or you attack them with deep, because up until I want to say it was prior to these last 2 weeks, they were 25th in explosive pass rate allowed. So you can beat Steve Nelson. We saw what Darius Slayton beat his ass like in the first few weeks. They've been beat. Will Fuller beat him for a long touchdown. And hell, Miles Boykin got him for a touchdown in the first game. So
and now they're not playing Boykin. They're playing Des Bryant. So I guess I alluded to it earlier. I just had it legit shocked me that Des Bryant played on 54% of the snaps, and he had 5 targets last week. So if he throws up the X on Thursday night, I'm just going to say I won't be shocked. I will not be shocked.
He got sent back down to the practice squad.
Oh, he got sent back down?
Yeah.
Oh,
they could pull him back up. What is it? One more time before they have to sign him?
2 times.
Two, right?
Yeah, 2 free.
It's still possible that they could bring him back up by Thursday. But as of right now, send him back down to the practice squad.
Interesting.
Before we turn on the mics, before we move on, I don't want to hog this, but there's one guy, and I got to get him up in here because we talked about him before we turn the mics on. So I'm going to forget about him if I don't bring him up real fast. If Danny Amendola is out this week, I'm in on Jamal Agnew. I like him. He's going to have the slot role for Detroit. Now, we got to monitor practice reports, coach speak, all that kind of good stuff before the Thursday game. But the reason I bring him up is he ran 85% of his snaps out of the slot last week. Houston is 32nd against short passing. Murray is one of their safeties who's been covering the slot. He has been really, really bad this year. 39 targets, 32 receptions, 2 touchdowns, and a 124 passer rating. Agnew is not a guy that he is legit min price. He is $3K. He saw 6 targets last week. If he sees 6 to 7 targets, if he gets 40 yards and finds the end zone at $3K as a guy that's not going to be played, if it allows me to play all the dudes, I'm in on it.
And I will just piggyback off that. I honestly didn't think that Amendola and Galladay were practicing, but it looks like they both practiced limited today. If they come back, I want exposure to both of them. And we just kind of talked about Willie Snead. I mean, who's the Willie Snead OG? That's Danny Amendola. Players coming back from injury are always low owned. People recency bias. People forget. I've already talked about I want exposure to Stafford. You have to think about the thumb injury, so he might be throwing short, which we would love Deandre Swift if he comes back because they're just going to target him a bunch, you would think. But it could be the same situation for Amendola. No one will want to play this dude. Amendola has had multiple, 7 for 70 type games on DraftKings that gets you home, even if he doesn't score touchdowns. But, throughout the years, Stafford with Golden Tate has proven that he loves to throw to the slot. So whether it's Agnew, trust me, D-Bro, I've written that down, or Amendola comes back, I'm definitely looking at that. And then just from a wide receiver standpoint, the last thing I just got to say real quick is that I don't really care what the matchup is for Deontay Johnson. The dude is incredible. 12.3 targets per game over the last 3 now that he's staying healthy. I love Juju, but I think Deontay Johnson is their wide receiver 1. He's just so good. And I'm obviously going to continue to want to get exposure to that.
Yeah, he's been incredible. I mean, the numbers just speak for themselves. And like you're saying, I mean, at a position that I'm looking at the wide receiver position here. And I mean, can we just lock in the guys who are going to give us like close to 30-point upside. I mean, really, I again, we want to correlate our lineups, and we want to, definitely have teams, especially, you're talking about Swift being out. If you can build teams that have both Zeke and Connor, like, go for it, and build with Kuti, build with Agnew if you're playing in that regard. But I'm looking at Deontay Johnson, and I definitely, it'll be interesting to see with Juju, if he gets ruled out for this game, that's going to split people on Claypool and Deontay. People will try and talk themselves into a scenario where Claypool is the better play because of maybe the red zone role, or because he's running, and Deontay, all he does is catch passes. And if he doesn't find the end zone, am I going to be disappointed? But he's just been so good. It just speaks for himself. And speaks for itself, and he has a rapport with Ben. You gotta love that. He's matchup proof. So I love that, especially with them being the same price. If Juju's getting ruled out, that could be interesting. Just before we move on real quick here, I just wanted to touch on, like, if Kenny Golladay is ruled in, how are you guys treating him?
He'll be in my main lineup if he's
play him.
I'm playing him.
Okay.
He will be in my main. He will be in my main lineup if.
Wow, that's scary. Kev,
That's simple. Gonna play him?
Are you playing him too? Because that would probably be the first time everybody agreed on a podcast. But
yeah, heck yeah, fuck yeah, I'm playing him. Damn
it! I thought you were pulling out the body bag, Kev.
I mean, they have no reason to hold him, or no reason to play him if he's even questionably limited, right?
Right.
They're so awful, and there's no reason.
Yeah.
And I think
the only
people,
question is the thumb for Stafford. That's it.
Yeah, the thumb for, I think it's trifecta.
So
you got the thumb for Stafford, you got Golladay coming off of injury, and you got Bradley Roby. So I think those three things, people will talk themselves into the scenario.
Bradley Roby and Vernon Hard-Days of hot trash, man.
Yeah,
give me all that smoke.
I'm not worried about that.
People are like, Bradley Roby shadows, and I was like, that's fucking fantastic. Then I know he's on the wide receiver one. Let's go.
Did you guys saw Davis Maddock, the stick where he's just reading off every cornerback matchup, right? I was dying because that's the funniest shit. Like, there's only so many situations where you need to pay attention to, and Bradley Roby's not one of them. And per Kenny Galladay's Instagram, his hip definitely looks fine. So
I saw that.
You didn't go there. That's so funny. Oh man,
his hip looks good. He's in my main lineup 100%. If he's back, he will be low owned. He's been hurt. He's been out. When he came back from injury last time, this dude, all he does is ball out. He'll be in my lineup for sure.
Yeah, he's entirely too cheap. I mean, he's $6K. The thing about this slate, this entirety of this slate, is that you can pretty much play all the dudes. Like, you don't really have to make any concessions.
Right.
Maybe one concession here, played out of defense, and just play all the dudes. Like, they didn't price these guys up to a point where you have to make true decisions. But I think that also makes things a little bit more interesting with this slate, because I think you're going to see a much more different builds, because you can kind of play everybody, and I think you can get a little bit different in certain other areas. But Kenny Golladay certainly fucking isn't one of them. Like, he should be locked into your lineups, because the dude is a baller. It's a great fucking matchup. Like, and we know that if he's out there, he's gonna 10 to 15 targets. He's gonna see the deep targets. Like, there's no way. Like, he's 100% in lineups. Like, you just don't even.
Stafford would definitely love to have him back. I know that for 100%.
Just from the FanDuel aspect, real quick, Galladay's more expensive. He's $7,000. I don't care. I'm still playing him. And just to kind of like, I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but especially on FanDuel, Terry McLaurin's actually the most expensive wide receiver, 7,900. He's obviously a better DraftKings receiver than FanDuel receiver because he plays with Alex Smith. So because of that, I obviously want to have some McLaurin, but on FanDuel, it's really easy to fade him, especially with these other spots in the Steelers wide receivers, because, like, I love Alex Smith, but come on, he's not, like, you said it earlier, Ryan, and it just, it triggered siren in my head. Like, I want to target 30-point upside wide receivers, and McLaurin can get you 20, and that still might get home, but I don't see him as having the same amount of upside as Cooks, Fuller, Golladay in the best game, Deontay, Claypool, et cetera, et cetera. I think
said he's the most expensive one?
He's the most expensive.
That comes into ownership for me, because if people are going to say the same thing and they're like, well, I don't want to pay for McLaurin, then I'll have more interest. but
he's
it
the most
depends.
expensive on DraftKings too.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah,
he's
definitely
a better. He's a better play on DraftKings.
But DraftKings is all.
And he gets a 100-yard bonus too.
I mean, he's so good. He's
DraftKings pricing is all flaccid this week.
Ryan, so, I know you like the narrative street. McLaurin needs 129 receiving yards to be the first wide receiver to hit 1,000 yards this year.
Oh, let's go!
Oh my God,
yeah, let's go!
Hey, so there you
I
go.
thought you were going to say it was his birthday or something, man.
I don't care about the Juju birthday not paying off. He got hurt, whatever. Send me all the narratives. Send me all the birthdays.
He got hurt like the last drive of the game or something like that. He got fucking hurt. Like that had something to do with it.
That flag, man. That flag got him. It jumped up and bit him.
It was late in the game.
They got the touchdown and they blew the candles for him and the shit in the end zone. He's chilling.
And Juju's definitely going to be back this week. Like he's definitely going to play. They already said that had it been a meaningful game and it was close, that he would have went back out on the field. So I mean, that's just precaution. So he's definitely going to play, but I don't want to be part of him.
How do you list that injury? Just like Juju DMP parentheses flag.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck is that, man? Like, damn.
That's some Anthony Davis shit.
It's so bad, man.
Don't do that to them. Don't do that. Don't put them in that situation.
At least the flag didn't get him in the eye like that Cleveland.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it the whole time, and I didn't say nothing, but I've been thinking about it too, man.
If that guy didn't go to the hospital, he would have lost his eye. You know that shit?
Oh man.
No, I did not know that.
What are you guys doing with the Houston wide receivers? Would you rather play Fuller or would you rather play Cooks? Because I feel like Cooks is going to have higher ownership because he's a hell of a lot cheaper. He's
I want Fuller
versus 6,400 of Fuller. And I
want them both.
I just want to be different, whichever one's lower owned.
I want whichever one's lower owned too, which is probably
okay. So I'm going to give a different take. I don't give two shits. I'm playing Fuller.
I love
Fuller.
Don't you see
Fuller is going to play against Trufant, and then he's going to roll into the slot some against Justin Coleman. Give me all that.
He's going the fuck off. He's 50-yard touchdown at least.
Yeah. Fuller was punking Stephon Gilmore last week, and it was hilarious, man. So yes, like, can he beat Trufant's that dusty ass into the ground? Yeah, it's going to happen.
But Cooks, and I've never really been a Cooks guy. Like, Cooks is with the right quarterback. I want
playing
them
well,
both.
Man.
My main team will be the double.
You can even play all three. I love the idea of playing all three. We've seen, I remember playing when they used to have the shout out primetime slates, but when they used to have primetime slates Sunday night, Monday night, I remember the Packers game, whatever it was, I can't remember how many years ago, but that one always stands out to me. Like Rodgers threw for 350 yards and 4 tutties. And the optimal on a 2-game slate had 4 pass catchers with him. And I was like, it makes so much sense because there's so many yards and touchdowns to go around that everybody.
Maddie, last week we were all talking about, not last week, but the week before.
And even Herbert last week.
But even before that, we were all talking about which Steelers wide receiver did you play versus the Bengals, and the answer was yes.
All of them.
The answer was yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can do this shit on the main slate. I mean, I finished 16th out of 3,000 people with the. I know,
but this is how you get different. You don't go 2 pass catchers, you go 3.
Exactly. Yeah. I went with the Mahomes triple stack against the Jets, and it almost took me home, and that was on the main slate. So you can absolutely do it, and that's how you get different. My main one that I'm just gravitating to right off the bat is Watson, Will Fuller, Cooks, and then Akins.
I love it. Dude,
so we can roll right into tight end because Akins is really exciting to me.
Yeah, 2,900 on DraftKings.
Oh my God! See, I'm playing both.
Let's talk about it. And you start to get to your builds, right? And I was just playing around with builds, and actually with that, what we're talking about, taking Watson, taking Fuller, playing around with Cooks or another wide receiver in that range, playing a Steelers receiver, and then you get into your flex and your tight end, and I threw in the Dallas defense just to throw them in there 2,800, I think, or whatever. And you start to get into these situations where at tight end, your builds are leading you to playing Hawkinson, leading you to playing Ebron, leading you to playing Schultz or Logan Thomas if you can't get to 5-2. Mark Andrews, which Mark Andrews is on the injury report. I think that needs to be said. I didn't even look at this until we're breaking down the slate, and I'm going through the logs here. But it looks like he had a thigh injury. DraftKings' report in the blurb is that he had a thigh injury going into the Cincinnati game in Week 5. Still played. Actually had a good game in that game. Put up 17 0.6 for DraftKings. So if he's, going to be questionable or whatever, that's kind of interesting against Pittsburgh. Because the one will scare people off there, but we know the usage is absurd. I mean, the dude is going to see passes if he's on the field. And so you got Hawkinson, who's now dealing with another injury. He's got a shoulder now. He had the toe. And how frustrating has he been? And he's been like the most consistent tight end all year, I feel like. He's consistently putting up double-digit points on DraftKings.
They just don't use him a ton, though. It doesn't make any sense. Like, he plays like 60% of the snaps, and he'll be chalky. Like, on a 3-game slate, my favorite thing to do with tight end is get a little crazy because it's the position that sucks anyway. Now, could Mark Andrews come out and catch 2 touchdowns and kill me? Let's go, man. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, excuse me.
Exactly. So I just like to get a little nutty, and it makes sense if I love Watson. I'll just like Akins came back from. Well, first of all, I think he's good. He caught a touchdown in week 1. He gets injured early. He comes back. I think he's been back for 3 games. Played 51% of the snaps last week. In all 3 games he's been back, he's out-targeted Fells. And Fells is winning people a lot of money there for a couple weeks. So, yes, both touchdowns go – both touchdowns go to the slot wide receivers last week, which could happen again. Kiki QT's absolutely in play. But if one goes to the tight end, it's probably going to be Akins. He should be pretty low owned, 3.7 targets over the last 3 weeks, which is fine for tight ends. I mean, TJ Hawkinson has 6.3 over the last 3. That's not that different, especially if some of the guys are coming back. So,
yeah, and if you're playing Watson too, I mean, how do you not talk your? Granted, I play a lot of lineups. I will be playing a lot of lineups on Thanksgiving, but I know Maddie, you're more of like the 3 max really tight builds that you want to get to. But if you're playing Watson teams, especially on this week, it's all about correlation. It's all about pairings, and I don't see how you can't talk yourself into a way of getting Akins on a roster that has Watson on it because of what we're talking about here. I mean, even with Hawkinson, he's seeing targets of 7, 8, 10 in 3 of his past 4 games. But if he doesn't score there, you're already, a little bit behind. And if Akins is how many times have we seen Akins take like a big 30-yarder to the house or just some 40-yarder to the house, something ridiculous because they just fall into these situations like that. And you're looking at this Detroit team like across the middle that doesn't really scare you at all. Fells has actually lost snaps to Farrell Brown over the past couple of weeks too. So I don't even think Fells is really like that in play unless all you're hoping for is a short touchdown. He's not going to really be utilized, I feel like, outside of the 20. So it does make for interesting builds because, I think people will look at Hawkinson and they'll say, okay, I want exposure to that game. How can I get it? Oh, I'll play Hawkinson on Detroit's side. I want exposure to the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game. And outside of Deontay, I really don't like anybody else. But, here's Mark Andrews at 5,200 at tight end. That's ugly. I'll play him. I'm not playing a Steelers receiver, but I want exposure. I'll play Ebron, who just scored last week. So there's so many ways that people –
We should be playing Ebron. Ebron is a really good play.
Ebron is a good play. Ebron's a good play.
I'm fine with that, but at a tight end position where you're talking about Ebron is 4,100, and as tight as salary is this week, like when you're paying for him over guys like Logan Thomas and Jordan Akins, that it really does mean that you are banking on a touchdown from Ebron, and I just feel like it could get you could get yourself into a situation where Ebron could go out there and maybe he catches a couple passes for, 40, 50 yards and he doesn't score. And that just might not be enough to win you it. But if you're playing Ben Roethlisberger lines, like sure, throw in Ebron. But I really just think that you want to correlate the tight end position with your quarterback and just go from there. Like I think there's going to be a lot of – say it again.
I was just going to say, I 100% agree, but I also think you can play tight end naked. I've talked about not really loving Washington and Dallas. Logan Thomas did play on 90% of the snaps last week. He's getting the targets. Okay. So it just depends on it. I think whoever your tight end is, you're probably going to need him to score to pay off in a big way, unless tight end's just a complete dumpster fire, which adds fuel to the Jordan Akins fire. But Thomas, 5.3 targets over the last 3 games. And then my whole kind of rant about how James Conner allows you to not play the wide receiver roulette with Pittsburgh in a way. Dalton Schultz kind of allows you to do that with Dallas and say, I'm not going to try to figure out which wide receiver is going to hit. Oh, Dalton Schultz is playing 90% of the snaps, and he's seen 7 targets per game over the last 3, which, by the way, is more than both Amari and CeeDee Lamb. So I could see a tight end in that game getting home and, me just having the only exposure in that game other than Washington D, which I'll probably be pretty heavy on, as I've talked about, having a tight end in that game as well.
Like I feel like just playing Akins is like trying to get too cute, like where you don't have to play a $2,900 wide receiver tight end. Yes, I just think there's better plays. Like Mark Andrews for sure, 100%. Like, and he's going to carry the most ownership, and I get that. He's probably going to be 50 to 60% owned because, again, this slate is not a slate where you have to make those concessions where you have to like, man, okay, I got to pay down at tight end because I want to get these guys in. Like, you can pretty much, for the most part, play who you want to play and not really have to make that concession. Like, I get Akins, like, and some of it makes a little bit of sense, but again, Mark Andrews, Eric Ebron, terrific play in my book at 4,100. Like, he's certainly getting the targets. He did really well in the spot the last time they played, 4 for 48 and a touchdown. He's certainly somebody they look for in the red zone. Dalton Schultz was the other guy that I was going to mention. If you're wanting to talk about the 2 teams that struggle the most, I guess, on this entire slate against tight ends, it is Washington, and then the other one is Baltimore. Are the 2 teams that struggle a little bit against tight ends. It's not a huge disparity between the others, but there's not like an absolute like, oh my God, like we got to play a tight end against this team on this slate and then this group of guys.
Which is why I think it's okay. You can play Jordan Akins at 2,900. The key to tight end is your guy is going to have to catch a touchdown. Yeah, because they're
not necessarily because Mark Andrews could go for 6 for 120.
Mark Andrews never goes for 100 yards.
So I'll throw this out here right now.
Please look up the last time Mark Andrews went over 100 yards and report back.
I'm actually going to full fade Mark Andrews, and y'all can hate on me all you want.
I don't hate that.
Pittsburgh is, and we're talking about DVOA. We talk about these rankings, and we talk about shading the middle and getting too much into it. Pittsburgh is first in DVOA versus the tight end. You want to know three last games that Mark Andrews has played versus the Steelers? 3 for 32, 5 for 45. 4 for 39, 0 damn touchdowns. I want no Mark Andrews. If I'm making a stand on this slate, I will not play Mark Andrews, period.
And look, 2 of the stands I'm making on this slate are, I just don't think Ezekiel Elliott is that good. I think he's an above average running back. I don't think he's incredible. And I just don't think Lamar Jackson this year is all that good of a quarterback. So that doesn't help Mark Andrews. And I do definitely want to push back on the Jordan Akins being cute thing because I definitely disagree with that because it's kind of 2 of the things I'm most passionate about with DFS correlating and colliding together. One is that in smash spots, in best games, in fantastic matchups, especially when you love the quarterback, every single pass catcher for that team and that quarterback get elevated. We know that Jordan Akins is the starting tight end for the Texans, and it correlates and collides with the fact that he came back from injury not that long ago. So a lot of people are sleeping and not realizing that. And so when you can combine both of those 2 things together, he's super cheap. He'll be low owned. He is the starting tight end for the Texans. You can look at it as usage, playing time, targets, everything. I definitely don't think it's getting cute at all. I actually think it's a super savvy tournament play. Now, if we're talking about cash, we can change the story. But
we never talk about cash.
We're not talking about cash. We're only playing tournaments on a 3-game slate. So I think he makes all the sense in the world and is not getting cute at all.
Who's going to be higher on, Kiki Kuti or Jordan Akins?
Kiki Kuti, because the news just
so Akins is your leverage if you're correlating with the third pass catcher or even the second pass catcher with him. Yes, the one thing I want to bring up about Akins,
and at the worst position too.
My favorite 3 tight ends on this slate are Dalton Schultz, Logan Thomas, and Jordan Akins, not necessarily in that order. You have Dallas and Washington is amazing for tight end. Both of them are 30th and 31st ranked in DVOA versus tight ends. Dallas has been terrible versus tight ends. Logan Thomas, people will look, and if I were to rank things, I actually like Dalton Schultz the most out of this one. Washington is terrible versus the tight end position. He got 3 red zone targets last week with Andy Dalton. I think that he's going to catch a touchdown this week. I think the matchup is there. I think if people are going to pick between him and Logan Thomas, people are going to go to Logan Thomas because Dalton Schultz is not a sexy name. People are going to look at Logan Thomas's game log and they're going to say, we got 60 and a touchdown last time they played, so let's go. And honestly, I would much rather play Dalton Schultz or I'd rather play Jordan Akins. And the reason for Akins, dude's running 50% of his routes out of the slot. If Kuti is going to go out of the slot, if I talk about we like the matchup against Justin Coleman, and Akins is coming off an 80-yard game, people are going to say, well, it's probably fluky. I'm more likely to lean into that, look at the slot matchup, and I'm going to go in on Akins here.
And I
just think, Derek, too, and talking about those three tight ends, I mean, they're all cheap enough to where you're feeling comfortable with them. I mean,
people are going to play Andrews, Hockenson, and Ebron over any of those three. That people are going to click those other ones.
As long as your guy catches a touchdown, I don't think it matters who you play.
Right.
And
Schultz and Ebron for me come down. They're 300 around. So that is fair, and I think both of them, probably have the same amount of chance, in a vacuum of catching a touchdown. But that's why I was talking about at the beginning, like as Kev's talking about, like playing Akins off of Desean Watson teams is not really. I don't like that at all. Because what you're hoping for there is to get the correlated points of him scoring that touchdown, and that then in turn helping Watson and him throwing to other players who you might have or maybe you don't. But I just don't see a way where we're looking at a lineup that says, oh wow, they just played Jordan Akins in that team. He got 2 touchdowns and nobody else.
Just correlate him with a running back for Detroit.
Houston.
Correlate him with a running back for Detroit. That's an easy way to sit here and correlate him with a Mindy stack around that.
I get what Ryan's saying,
but I get it. Swift, I get it.
If you have
Swift, hard for Will Fuller to bust too, and Brandon Cooks to bust too, and all these Houston guys are going to bust except for Akins. That it feels thin.
Yeah,
I get what Ryan's saying, and like 2,900. Yes, it feels cheap. Like if we were on a main slate, that would be cheap, and I'd be looking at that as a one-off spot. But when the other tight ends are only 1K more. And like you can play an Ebron as a one-off, and there's a chance that Ben only throws 1 or 2 touchdowns. But Watson against the Lions, like I guess he could run 2 touchdowns in and only throw for 2 touchdowns, and then Akins gets there as a one-off that way. But at that point, you want Watson anyways because Watson ran for 2 touchdowns at that point. So I get what Ryan's saying that Akins does feel a bit thin as a one-off because if Akins does smash, the odds that Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, and QT don't smash are very small.
Yeah.
And that who do we think, but outside of Andrews, who do we think has the highest ceiling out of this tight end group? Because you're looking at Hockenson. You think so?
Ceiling.
With his with his red zone usage that he gets, I mean, just to say that he couldn't catch 2 touchdowns on this game,
I get that.
Honestly, he doesn't have to go out and have 5 for 100 and 2 touchdowns. Like, I mean, he could easily just bring in 2 touchdowns. He could go
2 touchdowns would be the optimal. Yep.
If he goes 50 yards or 40 yards and 2 touchdowns, 100%. Then he's the optimal tight end. Yeah, absolutely. And for all the reasons I talked about. The Texans have been known to have problems with tight ends. I mean, we've seen years and years. What was it last year? Like Kelsey, like they put basically they try to bracket the dude. They try to do everything they could, and they could not stop the tight end position. So yeah, I was going to fight back with you about that, Kevin, but no, I agree with you. I like the hot call.
I legitimately believe Jordan Akins has the second most upside.
Wow.
Everything I've already.
You're point chasing, though. I mean, I feel like because if you look at the 2 weeks prior to that, he ran 28% of the snaps, 44% of the snaps. He is trending up, but he still only ran 8 routes, 12 routes, and he saw 4 and 1 target. Like he was last week an anomaly, or are you chasing the points of what happened last week?
Go back to the beginning of the season, Kev. What are you talking about?
But Darren Fells was out. Darren Fells was out for some of that. Whenever he was really popping. But
was he?
Regardless, yes. But regardless, like I get it, right?
But now we have Cobb out. These things will start to factor in. You have Cobb out. You have Stills that's questionable. So more, then in turn.
But it's an in-game situation, right? And so like they were thrusting someone. And now it is a Thursday night. I'm just saying, like I feel like that's some of this stuff. What?
Fells hasn't missed a game all year, and in Jordan Akins' first 2 games first 3 games, 81%, 83%, 68% of the offensive snaps.
I think he was just coming back
definitely
from
misfired
injury.
the first couple of weeks of the season.
Fells played 42%, 41%, 51% in those first 3 games. With
Akins
Jordan.
missed a what was it? It wasn't concussion.
Akins was
it
out.
A hamstring? He missed a long stretch
It was
there.
like 4 games. Or
Yeah, it was
something.
concussion.
I thought.
Concussion. Yeah, he had an ankle injury too. That's what it was.
He missed. He
Okay.
missed 3 games, and basically 4.
Yeah, and
he went
Fells was doing all right when he was out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I agree, Ben, that he has the next highest ceiling, and I think that Hawkinson and Ebron both have the same kind of ceiling.
Ebron has the
to me
ceiling.
just says that neither one of them has the ceiling that Andrews has. And you're looking at Hawkinson, who's
But Andrews' ceiling
4,700.
comes from 2 touchdowns. If you go back and look at every 20-point game that Andrews has, he caught 2 touchdowns. He never he's not Kelsey, he's not Waller, he's not Kittle, who can go out there and go for 100 yards. His value comes from touchdowns, and I agree with Derek. Even if he catches 1, I'm not sure that he burns me because of the matchup. Like, what's he go for?
He just got
1.
He just got 1 touchdown last week and got 20 against Tennessee.
Tennessee is terrible versus the tight end. That's a totally different conversation. I was all in on Andrews last week. I am not on that boat this week.
All his other game logs outside of last week, because that is you did call
Who
my
else
bluff
are they throwing to though? Who else are they going to throw the ball to in Baltimore?
Willie
he
Snead?
legitimately has
Gus
15
Edwards?
target upside, right?
But do they want to throw the ball at all? Is the other point. Like, they don't.
I understand that.
Care.
Of course, they don't want to run the football, or of course they want to run the football. We know that's what they want to do. But if the game flow and the game situation does not turn out that way, and they get behind early, they're not going to be able to run the football. So who's going to?
Lamar could just suck ass throwing the football like he's done all year. Like,
he could.
How many times do we see
terrible?
The Ravens get down by 14, they lose.
What about it? They just throw to Willie Snead.
Yeah, the Ravens are horrible when they're down by multiple scores.
The Willie Snead call.
I'm just telling you. Like, look at his game logs.
I shit you not. With everything,
the
everything that I've said about Akins, I had no idea that he had 83 receiving yards last week. I didn't even know that. Out of all the tight ends on this slate,
catching tight end.
The thing about it is that the Texans have been so sneaky. Like, if you look at their tight end production, if we could just roll it into one dude, which we've had at certain points of the year, like Fells started off the year, so he had 223-1, nothing versus Pittsburgh. But then if you fast forward to Jacksonville, has been a great spot for tight ends, 57-1, Tennessee 85-1, and then we have Akins sprinkling in production there as well. Yeah. It's like if we get the guy for Houston for the tight end, there's been some pretty damn good production over all the year.
And Akins caught all 7 of his targets in week 2. Fells went off when Akins was gone. Akins comes back. I'm just saying that, to me, out of all 6 tight ends, Fells has the highest receiving yardage upside to me. And so, how are we going to predict?
You mean
Akins?
Akins,
Akins.
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure. So
Akins. So
I think I agree from a yardage perspective.
And if he finds the end zone, and we're talking about 7 for 83 and a touchdown,
but we're looking at but the most touchdown equity goes with Hawkinson, correct? Because I agree with Kev on that one. Yeah, I think his red zone role. His red zone role. If you look at it, and I haven't looked at it since last week and stuff, dude was legit near the top 10 in red zone targets, end zone targets in the entire NFL. It did not matter the freaking position.
Okay, so I did not know that.
Frustrating.
I feel like
Hawkins
they throw to
so many weeks, and Matt Stafford's thrown an interception multiple weeks.
They throw to Jesse James.
Throwing to Hawkinson, he's thrown to Jesse James. He's missed him wide open in the end zone. It's such a frustrating thing, but he is seeing a role, and we'll have to monitor what his health status is going into that game, and Andrews to a certain extent, and Galladay's to a certain extent for Hawkinson as well.
TJ Hawkinson is tied for 10th in red zone targets on the season with 11.
Wow,
Hawkinson's definitely a great
tight end for everybody.
Everybody. That's 11. The only people above him are Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Mike Evans, Travis Kelce, Adam Thielen, Jimmy Graham, Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith, Calvin Ridley, and he is tied with a slew of dudes at 11.
Hawkinson's a good play. It's just
He has the most touchdown equity. I'm not going to fight that.
I think I like Hawkinson more as a one-off and Akins more as a stack with
as Watson. A correlated play.
Yeah,
that's probably true.
I like that. True. Yeah, I like that call a lot.
That's probably true. Although I will just push back a little bit. 2,900 on DraftKings. I think he can still be a one-off, but I would
have to see true. What build, like what my opportunity cost would be at other positions.
Yeah,
we're talking about getting weird on a 3-gamer. Like this isn't a 2 tight end thing for y'all, correct?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm not there. I know people play the 2 tight end bullshit. No. I got to throw it out there. I don't disagree at all. I just throwing it out there.
I'll bring it back real quick. I think that Eric Ebron has the highest odds to catch a touchdown outside of Andrews. I feel like Kev was kind of saying that. Just in this Steelers offense, any of those guys can catch one. And then just my last thing, and then I'll shut the hell up. D-Bro, I actually really like what you said about the Logan Thomas and Dalton Schultz thing, because the entire fantasy community all year, air yards, targets, snaps for Logan Thomas, but it's literally been the exact same thing for Schultz. And I loved him when Dak Prescott was there. Unfortunately, he's out, but he's still playing 90% of the snaps. He's always out there. He's still getting targeted. Right. It's the same situation as Logan Thomas. You can get him at home at a lower ownership percentage, I feel like. So that's kind of why I was talking about maybe having a one-off tight end in that game. So it's a similar situation, but I think one that people are viewing differently for some reason.
Schultz leads the Cowboys. He's tied with Gallup. He's got 9 red zone targets. So 2 behind Hawkinson.
And he literally has a top 3 matchup for tight ends this week.
And he's kind of good. Like he's a good player, I think.
I think there's ways that if you're correlating your lineups, like if you're not going to play Zeke, then do you play Schultz or another Dallas pass catcher and run him with McLaurin? Like if you're getting off ownership percentage, like Zeke doesn't get there, Schultz gets the 2 touchdowns. It's not insane. We're on a 3-gamer, boys. You got to get weird somehow.
We just literally saw it last week. Play action at the goal line, and they threw it to Dalton Schultz.
I would love to see Dalton splits thrown to tight end in Cincinnati. I haven't gone back and looked at that, but I feel like he's targeted Eifert.
Tyler Eifert?
Yeah.
The Tyler Eifert splits?
He loved
Dude, he kept trying to go, like he was forcing it to Schultz there towards the end of last game. And Minnesota, the other thing about it is Minnesota's really good versus the tight end. Like their safeties are good. So I think if he can catch a touchdown there, if he's going to get targets, we've only seen a 2-game sample from Andy Dalton, man. I'm going to go back to it. I like that game overall, and there's a lot of sneaky parts that nobody wants to play, Dalton Schultz being one of them.
And we talked about it with Lamar Jackson loving to throw down the middle of the field. Andy Dalton has always loved to throw down the middle of the field, whether it's a tight end, whether it's a slot wide receiver. So
true.
So on the season,
we've seen that with CeeDee Lamb. We've seen that with CeeDee Lamb.
All I was going to say is on the season, Mark Andrews leads all tight ends and red zone targets with 20. TJ Hawkinson is second with 17. And then in terms of end zone targets, Hawkinson and Mark Andrews are tied with 9. And that's among all wide receivers and tight ends. It's not just just among the tight ends. So both of them obviously are heavily involved inside the – and also I thought it was interesting that Marquis Brown was actually just below them. He has 8 end zone targets, which is a little wild.
Please don't make me.
That is wild.
I can't, man.
I don't want to.
I can't.
I don't want to.
Can't. I already got burned. I played Marquise in this last time. I played him in this matchup last time.
He did score a touchdown.
It's the only catch of the game. It hurt. It hurt so much. I was looking at my lineups and I was like, oh, he's going to.
Doesn't this feel like the week though? Like when everybody's completely just done with him, and that he's dead. Nobody's gonna play him
because we live in a
You're probably right.
This is the week that he just goes off and breaks the slate.
And weird things.
And then Twitter is going to be like, "See, I told you. Look at them air yards. They ain't been realized, man. Come on." Like, it's week 11, bro. Like, you ain't realized shit. I don't know if you're going to realize shit. Jesus.
Yeah, this will be the perfect week, too, because Scott Barrett just came out today. I think it was today. I saw it today.
That's every day for Scott. Every day is a Marquise day, bro.
He took the L on the Marquise Brown call. Yeah. He apologized.
Oh, that's it. Okay, never mind. That's a horse of a different color. So, never mind.
That's what I'm saying. So
it took him this long to take
pop off.
Yeah, it took him all the way to week 11 to take the L on Marquise.
Just
throwing it out there.
Go to the grave with you.
I have no exposure to Marquise this year. I played him against the Colts a couple weeks ago. He did nothing.
I played him once.
This is the type of situation, though, where Kev, like you said, like you just say, I don't really like him, but he's going to be 5% owned. He's going to be 8% owned.
I'll tell you what, though, Maddie, you talked about Gus Edwards earlier, and I was kind of, I was like, oh, I want to bring this up, but we were moving along. But I was going to say, if you're playing Gus Edwards and he's not one of your 2 running backs, like if you had him for some reason in the flex there and you had ways to kind of save salary, I would make, sure that I had $600 that I could pivot off to Marquis Brown on that lineup if we're thinking about it. Because if he, you're talking about the last play of the game and you're looking at players around you and, oh my goodness, some players are left and they only have, you can calculate it and it's only 4K or 42K or something like that. And you can figure out who people have. And just if you have the way to get to Marquis Brown there in that last game of him going, that would be bananas.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually have an example from this past weekend where I had Dalvin on, I think it was 3 of my 5 teams I played. But the 3 teams I had him on, I had like 1 or 2 guys who did awful. And so I was like, okay, well, there's guys in front of me that have Dalvin, so I need to pivot. Let me play Adam Thielen as a pivot. And Thielen fucking smashed.
Yeah,
so
35.
Coming down from Dalvin to Thielen, it allowed me to upgrade the other guys that I had left too. So I just wanted to touch on your point of being able to pivot in those later games is so important after you realize, what your team has compared to what the optimal has for that first game or that first 2 games and what's left on the last game of the slate. It's so important. Right. It's just like, even though Dalvin was the best play of the slate overall, you just have to be different at that point to try to vault yourself ahead. Like, what if Dalvin rolls an ankle in the first quarter and gets 4 points? And now I've got Thielen getting 35 and the field, 60% of the field has Dalvin getting 4. I have a massive advantage and I have a chance to cash and maybe even win a tournament. So it's so important just to be different at that point if you are drawing a little bit dead, especially on a 3-game slate.
I love that we're talking about this, man.
Get freaking weird. Play
points can make the difference.
Brown. If Marquis
got
Brown
a late swap, man,
and he scores 29 points, it doesn't matter what your other guys did. You've got a shot.
If you want to be hand-holding with people going into the last game, like if you're on the chalk or something like that, like, one of these Pittsburgh wide receivers, I don't care. Like, it's going to make you feel queasy and like you're going to freaking throw up in your hands, man. But like, if you're close to the top, you've got to sit here and try to find a way to get different. Unless you were just so far, like you're looking at it and you are just
got the optimal,
unless you're just crushing the field. Then am I going to tell you to get off a smash play in the last game and you are crushing the field? Then shit, no. But like, if it's close, you're looking at guys below you. They got 1, 2 guys, 3 guys that could possibly catch you.
They likely have the guy that you have and 2 others.
You got to do it, man.
A different guy. And
that's how you don't play. You don't play to cash. You play to try to get first in these damn things, man.
Yep. Right. Unless your lineups are dead. And you do play to cash, and then you pivot to make
then
sure.
You still do it. You still do it. Yes. Then you play from dead to cash.
right. Hey, and that's a great feeling. That is a great feeling. Dead to cash is phenomenal. So yeah, I just like to talk about that kind of stuff because I just can't talk about it enough, especially on Thursday as people are building their lineups. It'll be set and forget. And they will just be looking at their teams. And if if they didn't get the Houston and Detroit game right, they're just going to be like, damn, I didn't win money this week. I'm
going to go eat turkey. I don't care. I'm going to go take a nap.
Exactly. There's still 2 games left and you can figure out ways to kind of maybe, save your weeks. So it's very important.
Marquis is the perfect late round swap. 100%. I love it.
Yep.
Yeah, let's talk about defense here as we close it out and we get into our DraftKings build. And we didn't lie to y'all, man. We had 2 hours here and we're just talking about Thanksgiving goodness, the Thanksgiving slate. This is perfect. Kev gonna be in his little red photo room editing this late at night, late into the wee hours. So it's beautiful. But let's talk about defense here because I do think there's a conversation to be had here as well, and I think it's an important one as people try and get the defenses right. Now, Ben, I'm gonna have you start off here because of the way that FanDuel has priced things. I just clicked over just because I wanted to see, because I see the Cowboys here are 2,800 on DraftKings, and I go in FanDuel, and I believe they're the minimum price, right, on over there, which I think is just absolutely ridiculous when you're factoring in like who they're playing on the other side and what you're able to do over there with your build. So I think that makes for an interesting play. But I do think, the top two here on DraftKings are the Steelers and Washington football team. I think those are going to be where people start because the Lions and Texans game, we're expecting points. I think people don't want to play those defenses, and you kind of don't have to when you're looking at the Texans are 2,700 and the Cowboys are 2,800. And we just, if they're able to get pressure there with this front seven that they have with, Smith and the linebackers that they have getting back healthy, I do think that there comes some merit there playing a home game against the Washington football team, who hasn't showed us that they can really blow teams out or really take a lead and run with it. So Ben, let's start with you, man, and just kind of tell me where you're at with defense this week as we get in here early on.
Yeah, I'm cutting in and out a little bit, so let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that could be me too.
All right. So I'm actually surprised. I actually think that FanDuel's pricing is pretty sharp in some ways. Like I talked about Washington. Like I said, I haven't looked at pricing yet just because I just wanted to have the big picture conversations, really get my head. It's still Monday. I'm looking at this now. Washington, like you said, at 4,800, Cowboys in that same game at 3,300. That's a huge difference. And I want a defense in this game because just me personally, I'm not that into this game. So I'm looking at both of those defenses for sure.
Yeah, it does make for an interesting game there with defenses as they're both pretty good. We're talking about defenses here, and Kev, why don't you kind of talk to us about defense and what you're doing? I mean, we have talked about like not paying up for the top defense all year. It's only a 3-game slate. Is there any way that the Steelers at 4,200, can be on builds and just, make you feel comfortable with what you're able to do with the rest of your lineup?
I think I try to play Washington if I can get to them at 3,700. If I can't, I just pick who's ever the cheapest. Like I don't think there's like a clear path. I think to any of these defenses because I think Dallas is interesting at 2,800, but Alex Smith is so turnover prone or turnover. What's the word I'm looking for? Not prone, but averse. Where he is super safe, and so expecting him to throw a bunch of turnovers or have turn the ball over, I think is something that I wouldn't put a lot of money on. So the only defense that I would really consider that I think that has that shot would probably be Washington against Dallas because Andy Dalton can make a lot of dumb mistakes. Of course, I mean, I guess you could say that about Matt Stafford, but regardless, there's no defense on here outside of Pittsburgh and Washington where I feel like, okay, both these defenses are really good, but if I can't get up to them, I'm not going to try to force them in any lineup. I'll be fine if I have to play the Texans, I'll play the Texans. If I have to play the Cowboys, I'll play the Cowboys. Hope for the best. But for me, like that's pretty much where my build, whatever I have left, that's what I'm going to play.
Can you hear me now?
I feel you.
Yeah, you're good.
Much better.
All right,
much better.
Let's try this again real quick. Yeah, I think FanDuel's pricing is pretty smart in some spots. I wasn't looking at pricing just because I wanted to get my head straight. It's only Monday, but I'm looking at it now. Washington 4,800. That's expensive. So when I'm making builds, if I like you said, Ryan. So if I'm making builds and I want to get one more stud in the flex, and I can't afford it, I'll just drop down to Dallas at 3,300 because I've already said I want a defense in that game, and I kind of think Washington can win this game, but I don't know who's going to win. And I think both defenses can make plays because I don't love either quarterback in the game. So Washington's my favorite. The Steelers would be my second favorite, just like Kev said. But because of the pricing, if I can go down to 3,300, I'll just go down to the Cowboys.
Yeah, that's crazy. And for those of you who maybe, you're looking at dabbling on FanDuel or you haven't really played FanDuel, like the highest price defense is $5,000. So for Washington to be 4,800, I mean, that's pretty incredible that they're priced up all the way up there. That really is going to hinder some builds. Maddie, take it over, man. Defense here, Steelers at the top, Washington football team, Ravens, Cowboys, Texans, Lions in that order on DraftKings. How are you feeling? Are you feeling the same way about Kev? Just let the build talk for itself, and then whatever you can fit, you fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I do kind of like the Texans just because I like to expose myself to defenses that are going to face a lot of pass attempts. And if we think Houston crushes and Matt Stafford's going to have to throw a lot, there's obviously more bad things can happen with more dropbacks and more pass attempts. You look for more sacks, more sack fumbles, and more interceptions. So I will say, even though that game is, slated to be somewhat high scoring, don't sleep on the Texans defense there.
Well, and what week was that? I can't remember what week it was. It could have been last week or last year or the year before that. But I know there was a year where the defense started out with like 20 points, like from the slate. It's just like, well, shit. Like, the defense already has 20. So how am I going to be different everywhere else?
I want to say that was 2 years ago. I feel like it was like Minnesota or something 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was something just outlandish. And, when that first game goes a little bit awry, that's where you have to scramble. You have to pivot and you have to try and make other plays there. But defense too, I mean, unless there's really, unless you get into that 20-point range of defense, like the Cleveland Browns last week, who put up 24 or whatever it was, like that's where it's really going to like start affecting you and killing you. And you really have to look at other massive ways to get different. But, if they put up 15, 16, something like that, I think you can still feel good about the rest of your teams, how they come.
I remember it was the same year. I think I alluded to it earlier. The Stafford, Megatron, Theo Riddick, Megastack against Chip Kelly and the Eagles. That second game was, I think, the year that the Panthers went to the Super Bowl against Tony Romo, and they pick sixed him twice. So that I don't know if that's what you're thinking of, but the Panthers went stupid because I had some Stafford mega stacks and I was like, oh, I'm about to be raking in the money, but I didn't have Panthers defense and I was fucked.
Yeah, man, defense can be tilting. So I do like that, Maddie. I mean, you're looking at that, and like I said, they're on DraftKings, they're $100 different from the Cowboys, who are in a home game. And as Kev's saying, okay, so why am I not playing the Cowboys? Alex Smith protects the football. And so if they're going to be popular, which I do think that they will be popular because of the salary relief that they can have and just the home matchup there, the Texans at $100 cheaper does make sense in a pivot there when people are thinking, oh, that game's going to score a lot of points. I can't have a defense from this game. Texans don't get pressure, but, special teams touchdown or a random pick six, random sack fumble, like anything could happen. And especially on a 3-game slate, you have to let things kind of fall into place for you on lineups. Derek, talk to me about defense as we wrap this up.
I mean, you automatically gravitate to defenses that can pressure extremely well, put some duress on the quarterbacks. The Steelers and Washington footballs make a ton of sense in this one. Ravens, if they're missing 2 of their defensive linemen, I might just X them out because there's one, they're going to have problems with pressure. 2, they're probably going to have problems with run defense. So as a popular defense and just a sexy name, I might just take them off the board. I'm actually on the opposite end of what Maddie's talking about. I like the Lions. If I'm picking between the Lions and the Texans, I'll take the Lions. I mean, when I'm starting my builds on DK, I'll just put the Lions in as the holder and then make the rest of my build, and whatever I have left over, then I'll figure out what the hell I do with defense. If it's stay on the Lions, that's fine. If it's go up, that's fine too. Like, defense is the last thing to get filled for me, so I'm not worried. Like, I'm all about punt defensing. It doesn't matter. We talk about high total games. Lions are playing at home. I would pick them over going with the Texans in this spot because the Texans can't pressure, they can't cover, they can't do anything. The same thing can be said for Lions, but at least the Lions at home, I mean, you can look back to their last few weeks, 6 points, 4 points, 4.0, 4, 6, versus even looking at the Texans. And I mean, you're looking at 3, 5, 4, 0, -2, 4. I slightly lean the Lions, 1 being a home team, 2, we know that they're going to pass with Watson. I mean, we know the offensive line, we've talked about it, is not great. So Watson can be sacked. He can be pressured, even if the Lions are not wonderful, even though they're missing some guys. I think you're also looking at like a little bit, I say a little bit because pricing we've talked about is a little bit softer on this. Like, you could play all the dudes. So if you wanted to try to get some correlation with your lineups and you wanted to go James Conner and Steelers defense, if you got the cash and the build works out, I don't disagree with that. So a lot of it is, it's going to work out with 2 different factors where I land on defense. It's going to come down to what the rest of my build is, and if the Lions and the men defense are the last ones in, I don't care, because if all the defenses only score 4 to 6 points and the Lions score 4 points, then it doesn't matter. You could have paid $4,200 for 4 points. You could have paid $2,200 for 4 points. It doesn't freaking matter. Versus if you wanted to go correlation and your build works out where you got the salary to do that, I'm fine with that too. So really, it comes down to just lineup construction for me, and that's where I'm going to land.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's got to be. This is the perfect week, I feel like, and we've talked about this a ton on the Degenation pod, where you just let your lineup kind of speak to you, and it just has to be one of the last things you consider. You can't be looking at this and saying, oh my goodness, I need to play Pittsburgh, I need to play Washington, and just whatever, my build can be after that is what I'll play. You have to just think about your correlated teams from the offensive standpoint, and if that, if you're getting on lineups and that leads you to Lions at 2,200, then Lions at 2,200 it is. I mean, on a 3-game slate, even on Watson builds, I mean, sometimes it can just make sense. And defense is just
I'm not going to come off a 6K wide receiver to go down to a 4K wide receiver just so I can get the damn Steelers defense in. The hell with that shit. I'm not doing that.
There's no must-own defense. So, yeah. 100%.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody has to be in play, but I do think there is some merit to saying, okay, 3,100 for the Ravens, Debra, as you were saying, like they're missing 2 guys. I could see myself like not having any of them. Like even if it's in that range, like I'll just go down. If I have 3,100, I'll still go down to Cowboys or Texans or Lions even and play them, just because I just don't see a way that they could potentially.
When the Ravens are a road dog, like that, you just look at that. Right. That doesn't exactly favor them, and they're beat up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And Lamar's been turning it over this year, too, so they could get into short fields a lot of points. So it's gonna be fun this week. It's a fun one here for the Week 12 NFL DFS breakdown, and we can't end this podcast without building a team. And there's 5 of us, there's 9 positions. So somebody's going to have to go twice. It'll be interesting to see who that person is. But we've been playing in the $5 huddle single entry on DraftKings pretty much all year. Started out strong. We're going to need some recovery here. So Ben and Derek, you guys can help pick us up here on the builds. And let's get into this build here as we pull up the $5 single entry. This is a 9,500 pool of people who are playing in, just to kind of give some perspective there. So, not crazy big field, but still close to 10K people. So it's a single entry. You got to think about that in ways that you can be different if you're getting into pools like this. So we'll start it off, and let's see. I mean, we got to get Derek. Let's start with you, man. I feel like you're always a voice of reason. Started off with the build, and let us know how we're going for Thanksgiving slate.
I was like, damn it, don't pick me first. All right, man, forget it. I'm going Will Fuller. I'm not picking quarterback. I'm just going to go with it. I'm going Will Fuller.
Kev, pick it up.
That was a mistake.
What?
And I love it. I want to hear it. It's the most Kevin thing said the entire pod.
Well, now you just leave me with the ability. Like I really think about going. I mean, I could go Lamar Jackson here. That would be fun. But I'm going to go James Conner.
Let's go.
Fair enough. Put James Conner in at running back position. Ben, we'll go to you.
I was gonna say Watson, but fuck it, we're going Jordan Akins.
Maddie, take it over.
Well, we've got Fuller and Akins, so we might as well play Watson.
Figured I'd let someone else do it.
All right, so I'm gonna go correlation in that game, and I'm just going to put in Kenny Golladay right now as the placeholder, seeing as we don't know what his status is, but if he plays, I think that makes the most sense of a correlation build on a team like this. But he's also the most expensive wide receiver, so there are ways to kind of get, get different if he is ruled out, and we can get down into the Marvin Jones, Marvin Hall, Agnew, as Derek was alluding to, a realm of things to kind of make this build interesting there. So this is Monday, and there is a lot of room for us to pivot on these plays, and we'll be able to share it out on the Degenation Pod Twitter handle there as we get to finalize this build, because there are so many people who are questionable that we will have to monitor here. So keep that in mind. I guess the other thing too would be if Swift is in. If Swift is ruled in, we could also play him at he's 6,500. So I'll try and monitor that we have 300 to play around with, or 500 to play around with, so we can move up to him.
I said earlier, I thought FanDuel's pricing was actually kind of smart. I've been just making lineups on my phone. It's not. It's super soft. And then I'm looking at DraftKings. It's super soft. And I'm looking at DraftKings, which is usually more competitive. How are Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Kenny Galladay, like how are these guys not all at least $1,000 more expensive? I don't understand.
They were trying.
I don't understand.
You play whoever you want. I think McLaurin actually goes lower owned because of it.
Yep.
Yeah, well, and I think that, I mean, we know that Thanksgiving kind of lends itself to, it's right before the fantasy playoffs. People are more, Ben, you talked about it at the beginning, like you're on DraftKings because they're offering so many promos for you to make it enticing for you to come on. So if you're a casual player or somebody who maybe created a DFS account at the beginning of the year when they were doing that free bet for the Kansas City whoever that was, the Kansas City Houston game opened up, and there was that free $100 that they're doing. They're offering all these incentives to get people in. I think they made pricing soft for a reason, because if they made it as tight as they have been doing for the main slates over the past couple of weeks, it would just not encourage people to play. So maybe they're trying to cater to the masses here this week. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with reasons for them, because it is.
I think it makes it fun though, because like Maddie said, like you can play anybody, so that's going to create more unique builds. So
all the dudes don't always score all the points. Like if you could play any slate with no salary cap and you just went in and you plugged in Devontae Adams, okay, let me get Dalvin Cook, okay, let me get whoever the top QB is, like let me get Patrick Mahomes. All those guys are not going to be the highest scoring players on the slate.
No,
you got to take stands.
They're the safest.
Stands.
But they're
like
not.
I talked about not playing any Mark Andrews. Yep. You have to take stands, regardless of what they are.
You have to take stands more on short slates than on bigger slates. Mm-hmm. You have to.
Now you could be totally wrong, and then you're just going to burn all your lineups. But if you're right, see at the top.
Diversify, make a couple different stances, and let it ride.
Agree.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, so let's get to the build. And so, Derek, I actually moved off Kenny Galladay and I put in Swift just because he is the most expensive Lion. And if he plays, I do like him probably the most of that game as a potential run back, and just hope that he's getting the scoring and forcing Watson to throw. So I put him in at 6,500, which gives us Watson, Connor, Swift, Fuller, and Akins. 5,150 is what's left per player. We got 2 wide receivers of flex and defense, and it's back on you.
All right. I'm going to correlate with James Conner. I'm going to go Willie Snead here. There, he's dead! Yes! Leave some salary. You can pivot to Marquis Brown there.
There you go. All right. Kev?
What's he going to say? This is terrible. This is the worst.
You're on mute, Kev. You're on mute.
So since I'm making a mirror lineup here with this, I'm not going to play Willie Snead, and I'm going to X that out, and I'm going to put Marquis Brown in. But on my pick, I'm going to go with.
Yes, I knew it was coming.
Did your mirror build have Akins too?
I did leave Akins in. Like I can see that as correlation play and everything else, but I cannot with a good conscience. The 2 guys that I was not going to play in it. We're going to be Gus Edwards or fucking or Willie Snead. So
Kev, are you just doing?
Yeah, you had to take a stand.
Kev, are you just doing this on the side yourself, or are you literally canceling out Derek's pick?
Oh, no, yes, I am using the lineup. You guys are. I'm throwing it in the wishbone.
Ben, the answer is yes.
And I'm canceling out the pick because I cannot, in my own heart, play Willie Snead. So
all right, so we're going Marquis Brown instead. Okay, because I'm following along here.
No, you guys are still going with Willie Snead. I'm not. I'm talking about on my own lineup that I am building with your guys' picks.
That's what
Santa said
I am
no.
changing the play.
Yeah,
on my lineup. But on this lineup, it still has Willie Snead. Yes.
and knowing that it has Willie Snead, Kev, how would you look to save the lineup, so to speak?
Well,
he would say play the Pittsburgh defense because Willie Snead sucks ass. That's what he would say.
Two fumble
In correlation, you're playing Willie Snead, he sucks.
That's the correlation we
we've already paid the rake on this lineup with playing Willie Snead, so I'm gonna go. You know what? We're just gonna get weird now. I'm just gonna play Michael Gallup at 3,500.
Oh God, this is going off the rails real quick.
Oh boy. So now you know what you did, Kev, is that
nope. Actually, no. I changed my mind. I'm playing Ezekiel Elliott in the flex.
Okay.
He's so cheap too.
I was gonna say, because if Swift gets ruled out and Gallup is 3,500, Gus Edwards is 5K. Just move that. Move Gus Edwards into
winner chicken dinner, baby.
But okay, no. So we got Desean, we got Connor, we got Swift, Fuller, Snead, Akins, and Elliott. Wide receiver and defense left. This build is actually interesting. I don't mind it. So how we gonna bring it home here? Ben, it's you and then it's Maddie. So decide who's gonna take defense and who's gonna take receiver.
So we have Watson, Fuller, Akins. We bring it back with Swift if he plays. We have Connor for Pittsburgh. Yep. We bring it back with Willie Snead. And then the only person we have in Washington and Dallas right now is Zeke, which is fine.
It just depends on what your 2v2s look like.
Right.
I mean,
let's
you could bring back Zeke with McLaurin. You can
triple stack Watson.
You could triple stack Watson. And then
Will is smart. Will is a very smart man. That's why he listens to the show all the time.
Will, shout out Will.
You could play Cooks and then get to Steelers D and correlate with James Conner.
Let's not overthink it. Let's triple stack it like we've talked about the whole show with Brandon Cooks.
All right,
Steelers D.
I think we need a little triple stack upside here.
Steelers D, and that's 0. That is 0.
Wait, I can't fit him in on my lineup. Hold on. I can't.
Marquis Brown's a little too expensive.
Well, I guess we'll be in first while you're sitting in 15th, Kev. It's all good.
All right.
Hey, Kev, play Miles Boykin, Kev. You'll fit him in.
Play Dez. Play Dez, baby. Yeah, play Dez. He can't separate. I mean, you looking for the Nick Boyle replacement? He's a tight end, right?
Hey, I feel really good. So in my lineup is Desean Watson, James Conner, Swift, Fuller, Marquis Brown, Brandon Cooks, Akins, Elliott, and Washington football team. So.
See, I like that a lot too, but then you're Washington and Zeke. I mean, I guess it's fine on a 3-game slate, but I don't really love that negative correlation.
Yeah, it just feels negative. It doesn't feel like positive EV, but what do you know? Whatever.
So that's the team one more time. It's in the $5 single entry huddle if you want to play along. Watson, Connor, Swift if he plays, Cooks, Fuller, Willie Snead, Akins, Ezekiel Elliott, and Pittsburgh D. Submitting that in to the lineup, as one of the lineups, and that I think is going to do it for the Week 12 Thanksgiving slate breakdown as we get into 2 hours and 30 minutes of what can only be classified.
Hey, y'all knew it was going over
typical.
We knew from the jump.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, really, I mean, you guys just account for, 30 minutes of talk because we're consistently hitting 90. Just the 3 of us on the Degenation. So we just add you guys in, just bring in an extra 30. It's all good there. But we appreciate everybody who's been rocking around. YouTube channel's actually been pretty active tonight. So we appreciate everybody who's been rocking around this whole time. to hear everything broken down. It's a family tradition. It's one like any other. It's what we've done all year to give you guys, fantasy goodness. And especially with it being early in the week on Monday, just take everything with a grain of salt. Go back and listen to the positional breakdowns and just kind of, we did talk things out. If this guy misses, if this guy ends up playing, everything is going to be covered there on how we feel. So you'll have a lot to kind of unpack there. But can't thank you guys enough for joining us in. I mean, Ben and Derek for taking the time to come in here, join in on the foolery that we offer here. It's great talking to you guys as always, and we'll definitely have to get you guys back, whether it's for the regular season or for playoffs, which is always fun there. The wild card weekend, maybe we can work something out and make something happen.
Yeah, baby. That sounds great.
Man. Yeah. Derek Brown at @DBro_FFB is where you can find him on Twitter. If you guys aren't following him already, you have to do so. FTN is where he's holding it down there for the nation. One half of the Chalk Fade podcast, right? I got that right?
Yeah, you got it, man.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure. And Ben Cummins, you can find him on Twitter at Ben Cummins FF, doing stuff with the fantasy footballers and doing stuff on his own YouTube channel as well. So make sure you guys are following him on Twitter. Go check out his content that he's putting out every week with Benny's Bets and other weekly breakdowns that he's doing onto the slate as he talks about FanDuel as well. But he, took it on the chin this week, playing some Draftkings with us. We really appreciate that. And signing off for the usual suspects, Mr. Kevin Steele, the Godfather himself at Fantasy Rap 13. Child, please going over to Matty Buckets, Matty DFS. Matt, I was where you can find him on Twitter, and myself, Ryan Alexander _W, Ryan Williams. Guys, week 2 applied. Go out there, get this money for the Thanksgiving slate. We'll see you guys in the chat. We'll see you guys in the Slack, and thank you guys for rocking along with us. It's the Degenation powered by the Fantasy Authority. We will catch you guys later this week for the main slate breakdown. We're still going to get that to you. Until then, peace.